He had hoped that his marriage to Val would help bridge the gap, but even his bannermen seemed to refuse to acknowledge Val as their queen. Even his own guards did not enjoy the thought of accompanying him and Jon to Hardham to rescue the wildlings. He smiled when Shadow looked over at him from the brazier. "Looks like we are on our own with this one, boy." Looking at the flames, Brynden was suddenly reminded of the Red Woman. He also remembered his mother's warning about Renly Baratheon's death. At least he wouldn't have to worry about ending up like Renly anytime soon. The Red Woman had made that clear, as he knew she wouldn't lie about such a thing when her life was in his hands with Stannis leagues away from them. Later, Brynden was grateful to see Val when she entered their room. "Where have you been?" he asked as she hung her cloak. "Out watching the crows practice with their bows," Val replied, making her way over to him. Brynden smiled. Well, at least one of us was enjoying themselves. He did not at all resist when Val pulled him to his feet. After his meeting with his bannerman, Brynden needed a release to keep his mind off things. He quickly undid her bodice and it fell to the ground in a puddle around her. He was not at all surprised to see that Val was not wearing a brassiere underneath her bodice. "Looks like someone is getting excited down there," Val whispered into his ear, gently brushing her hands against his breeches where his member was bulging. "I'm not the only one," Brynden grinned, feeling how wet Val's sex was. "I take it your lords did not agree with your decision to go to Hardham with Lord Crow," Val said while undoing his breeches. "They would prefer to sit back and do nothing," Brynden sighed, burying his face into her neck, taking in her sweet scent while he grasped her breasts. "I was a fool to believe that our marriage could help heal centuries of bad blood between our people. I warned you that it would not be easy," Val moaned as he slid one of his hands down her thighs and jammed 2 fingers up inside her. "I know," Brynden groaned, feeling Val's soft hands stroke his manhood. Val then gave a startled squeal when he lifted her off from the ground by the waist to seat her on his desk. He ignored the mess they made when parchments and letters scattered off the desk. Before they could continue, both Brynden and Val stopped what they were doing when they heard a noise from outside. That was a horn, Brynden noted. From the brazier, Shadow pricked up his ears. "Crows?" Val wondered, her body tensing up. "Hopefully," Brynden said. One blast was for Rangers returning. Then it came again. The sound seemed to fill the solar. 2 blasts, Val whispered. "Wildlings," Brynden hoped. Nothing could be heard from outside, and Brynden was certain that Northmen, Black Brothers, and Free Folk were all waiting in silence, listening. An eternity seemed to pass until Brynden sighed in relief. 2 blasts. Mance. Tormund Giantsbane had come at last. Chapter 22, Ours is the Fury. Thanks for all of your suggestions last chapter. Now I know for certain that Brynden's firstborn son will be named Cregan. This chapter will feature my first ever naval battle, so go easy on me, lol. The one from the last storm I wouldn't really count as a naval battle, as it was mostly just a siege. Enjoy and review." The Vale looked just the same as Catelyn remembered from her last visit. As she saw the snow-clad summit of the Giant's Lance loom above her, an immensity of stone and ice that dwarfed the Eyrie perched upon its shoulder. Icicles 20 feet long draped the lip of the precipice where Alyssa's tears fell in summer. At least this time, Catelyn didn't have to worry about being ambushed by the mountain clans. Catelyn had learned from Bronze Yohn that the mountain clans were bolder now after they had come back from the war, but she had a stronger escort this time than the one she had when she had brought Tyrion to the Eyrie. Not for the first time, Catelyn wished that her son had gone himself to negotiate with the Lords Declarant, but he was still stuck at the wall, dealing with the wildlings and trying to keep the peace with the new alliance. Even the sworn brothers of the Night's Watch were wary of their new allies and reluctant to trust them from what Catelyn had learned from Brynden's letter. She just hoped she would not fail him like she had failed Robb when she had tried to convince the Baratheon brothers to make common cause against the Lannisters. Even if she did not at all trust Stannis Baratheon after what she had witnessed the night of Renly's death, Catelyn had no choice but to accept her son's decision to ally with the man. Brian had been none too pleased about the alliance and had kept her distance from Stannis Baratheon and his men while they were at White Harbor. Entering the Lords Declarant war tent, Catelyn was greeted by Yohn Royce and the other members. Lady Stark. Yohn Royce bowed. The Lord of Runestone towered over her. Though his hair was grey and his face lined, Lord Yohn still looked as though he could break most younger men like twigs in those huge gnarled hands. Lord Yon Royce had been one of the first of the Lords Declarant to greet Caitlin and Sansa when they had arrived in the Vale from their journey from White Harbour. From what Caitlin had learned about when they had formed was after her sister's fall, where they had gathered at Runestone, making a pact together, vowing to defend Lord Robert, the Vale, and one another. Their declaration made no mention of Petter, the Lord Protector of the Vale, but spoke of misrule that must be ended, and of false friends and evil counsellors as well. She only hoped that when their task was done they would swear their swords to her son's cause when Sansa was wed to Harold Hardyng, sealing their alliance with the Vale. "My lord," Caitlin greeted back. "I trust our agreement still stands." "It does," my Lady Bronze Yohn replied. "Once we are done here we will declare for House Stark once your daughter weds Harold Hardyng. We will aid your son in the wars to come," my Lady Waynwood added. Lady Anya was the only woman amongst the Lords Declarant, and wore a deep green mantle with the broken wheel of Waynwood picked out in beads of jet. Harold Hardyng was her ward and had agreed to the match so long as Harold did as well. "Then let us begin the ascent and be done with this mess," young Lord Hunter said. His ermine cloak had 5 silver fand on a brooch pinned to it. Caitlin recalled the last time she had made the ascent to the Eyrie, wishing that she did not have to go through it again. It took most of a day to make the climb, even on muleback. Afoot, most men took several days. Sansa had remained behind to get to know her future husband while Brian and Selyn Corbray accompanied them to the Eyrie, leaving the rest of her guards to protect her daughter. She was not at all pleased when she was once more escorted to the top by Maya Stone. Caitlin had nothing against this girl, but she was suddenly reminded of her own son's bastard daughter back at Winterfell and of Ned's, who was now the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Once again, she had no desire to go the rest of the way afoot, and like Lord Redfort, Belmore, and Lady Waynwood, she chose to be drawn up by the winch while the other lords made the climb. Once they were all gathered at the Crescent Chamber, they were greeted by one of the servants in Lord Robert's name and served bread and cheese and cups of hot mulled wine in silver cups. "The Lord Protector awaits you in the Solar. If my lords would follow me." From the Crescent Chamber they climbed a steep flight of marble steps that bypassed both undercrofts and dungeons and passed beneath 3 murder holes, which the Lords Declarant pretended not to notice. Belmore was soon puffing like a bellows, and Redfort's face turned as grey as his hair. The guards atop the stairs raised the portcullis at their coming. "This way, if it please my lords." A square-faced stocky man with a squashed nose and a mat of nappy grey hair stood outside the Solar. He opened the door for them and followed them inside. Petter was seated at the trestle table with a cup of wine to hand, looking over a crisp white parchment. He glanced up as the Lords Declarant filed in. He did not at all seem surprised to see Caitlin amongst the group. "My lords, my ladies, be welcome." His eyes rested on her for a moment before focusing his attention back to the others. "The ascent is wearisome, I know. Please be seated." Caitlin could not trust him, not after all she had learned from Tyrion during their journey to the Eyrie. What could he have hoped to gain by lying to her? Yet even after Ned's fall, Caitlin had heard that Petter had continued to serve the Lannisters during the War of the Five Kings, eventually being named Lord of Harrenhal. She remained silent as she along with the other members of the group arranged themselves side by side, all save Nesta Royce, who hesitated before walking around the table to take the empty chair beside Lord Petter, and Lyn Corbray, who went to stand beside the hearth instead. The heart-shaped ruby in the pommel of his sword shone redly as he warmed his hands. "I have been reading this remarkable declaration of yours," Petter began. "Splendid. Whatever Maester wrote this has a gift for words. I only wish you had invited me to sign as well." Before they could continue, the door to the Solar swung open and they all turned as Maester Coleman entered, looking nervous and shaken. "Pardon the interruption, my lords, my ladies." Petter frowned. "What is it?" "We were not to be disturbed." "Lord Robert is gone, my lord. The sickness took him." The brooch that fastened Sir Roland Storm's cloak was a field of yellow nightingales, wrought in black. He wore a suit of black plate armor. Storm had a pox-ravaged face and an air of tattered chivalry. The bastard of Night Song was no callow tourney champion but a seasoned killer. This one will never bend, Jaime thought, but he had to try to avoid bloodshed and get back to Cersei. Lord Redwyne had insisted that they starve the garrison out or create a breach in the walls through mining, but both options would take too long in Jaime's mind, and he had no desire to invest his time with this castle. These men on Dragonstone presented no threat to King's Landing, but Sir Seer insisted that the castle be taken. He drew up a yard from Sir Roland, and inclined his head to the man. Kingslayer said Storm. That he would make that name the first word from his mouth spoke volumes, but Jaime was resolved to keep his temper. Bastard, he responded. Thank you for coming. State your terms and be done with it, Lannister. Straight and to the point. Jaime doubted this knight would be easily convinced to surrender and bend the knee, but he had to try. Surrender your men and the castle, bend the knee, and King Tommen will legitimize you and name you Lord of Night Song and of the Marches. At least this parley would be the shortest one Jaime had been in. A tempting offer, but your king is a bastard born of incest, and if I recall, Sir Philip Foote, the man who slew my brother, was named Lord of Night Song and of the Marches after the Blackwater. That can be easily changed, sir. All it would take is a royal decree from the king. You have my word on that. Your word of honor. Sir Roland raised an eyebrow. Do you even know what honor is? A horse. I will swear any oath that you require. Spare me, Kingslayer. I want to. Strike your banners and open your gates, and I'll grant your men their lives. Your men shall be free to go where they will, though I will require them to surrender their arms and armor. As promised earlier, you will be granted a royal decree of legitimization along with the lands and titles of your house. The answer is no, Lannister. The only king I will serve is Stannis Baratheon. If you will not yield the castle, I must storm it. Hundreds will die. Hundreds of mine. Thousands of yours. Your garrison will perish to a man. I know that song. Do you sing it to the tune of the Rains of Castamaria? My men would sooner die upon their feet fighting than on their knees beneath a headsman's axe. This is not going well. This defiance serves no purpose, sir. The war is done and your king has fled to the north. To protect the realm. Now he has formed an alliance with the Demon of the North and the Wildings. It is only a matter of time before they return. By then the castle will be ours. Your king is a lost cause. You must be blind as well as maimed, sir. Lift your eyes, and you will see that the stag still flies above our walls. I've seen him. He looks lonely. Your king has no more power in the south. Most of your fellow Stormlords have bent the knee and sworn their fealty to the Iron Throne. It is only a matter of time before the rest follow. Only Storm's End and Dragonstone remains. Lords Tyrell and Rowan are laying siege to Storm's End as we speak. We have 20 times your numbers. I could care less about your numbers, Lannister. No matter what you say, my answer will still remain the same. There is a quicker way to decide the matter. A single combat. Sir Roland grinned. When you were whole it would have been a good fight, but now it is not worth the risk nor the joy in killing you. I have my orders from my king and I will continue to obey them. Are there any terms you will accept? He demanded of the bastard of Night Song. From you? Sir Roland shrugged. No. Why did you even come to treat with me? A siege is deadly dull. I also wanted to see this stump of yours that the Black Wolf took. If I were him, I would have taken more than just your hand. Sir Roland wheeled his mare and trotted back to Dragonstone. The portcullis descended with a rush, its iron spikes biting deep into the ground. Tormund Giantsbane was not at all the kind of man Brynden had expected from a leader of the Free Folk. He was not a tall man but was immensely broad, with thick gold bands graven with runes bound his massive arms, and he wore a heavy shirt of black ringmail that could only have come from a dead ranger. Brynden could understand why he was called Tormund Hornblower, as he bellowed loudly in his wrath. Brynden could understand the man's anger as he bellowed often and loudly during their meeting. He roared, he shouted, he slammed his fist against the table so hard that a flagon of water overturned and spilled. A horn of mead was never far from his hand, so the spittle he sprayed when making threats was sweet with honey. Jon had accompanied Brynden to represent the Night's Watch as their Lord Commander, standing in silence whilst Tormund called his brother a craven, a liar, and a turncloak, cursed him for a black-hearted buggering kneeler, a robber, and a carrion crow, while accusing Brynden of wanting to fuck the Free Folk up the ass. Twice he flung his drinking horn at Brynden and Jon's head, though only after he had emptied it. Tormund was not the sort of man to waste good mead. Brindon took it all in silence, never raising his own voice nor answering threat with threat, but neither did he give more ground than he had come prepared to give. Finally, as the shadows of the afternoon grew long outside the tent, Tormund Giantsbane, Tall Talker, Hornblower, and Breaker of Ice, Tormund Thunderfist, husband to Bez, Mead King of Ruddy Hall, speaker to gods and father of hosts, thrust out his hand. Done then, and may the gods forgive me. There's 100 mothers never will, I know. Brindon clasped the offered hand. They were his people now, whether his bannermen liked it or not. He was the Stark of Winterfell, who had slaughtered the Ironborn, taken a Wildling as his wife and queen, and opened the gates and let the free folk march through, all for the sake of protecting his kingdom. There was no turning back now. Done and done, he said. Tormund's grip was bone-crushing. I do not know which one of you is worse, you or your brother, he said as he did his best to turn Brindon's hand to pulp and bone. Gold for Groel, and boys, a cruel price. A fair bargain leaves both sides unhappy, I've heard it said. 3 days. If I live that long. Some o' my own will spit on me when they hear these terms. Tormund released Brindon's hand and looked at Jon. Your crows will grumble too, if I know them, as will your kneelers, he said, looking back at Brindon. And I ought to. I have killed your black buggers and raided your lands more than I can count. It might be best if you did not mention that so loudly when you come south of the wall. Brindon doubted his bannermen would be pleased to hear that. Ha! Tormund laughed. Wise words. I'd not want you crows to peck me to death or your kneelers to hang me. He slapped Brindon and Jon's back. When all my folk are safe behind your wall, we'll share a bit o' meat and mead. Till then. The Wildling pulled off the band from his left arm and tossed it at Jon, then did the same with its twin upon his right. Your first payment. Had those from my father and him from his. Now they're yours, you thieving black bastard. They both had agreed that the Wildling's payment would be given to the Night's Watch to help pay for more food supplies to be delivered to the wall. I will take my leave then, Brindon told them, letting them speak alone as he knew that Jon and Tormund were acquainted with each other during his brother's time as a captive of the Wildlings. Outside the day was bright and cloudless. The sun had returned to the sky after a fortnight's absence, and to the south the wall rose blue-white and glittering. On days like this the wall shimmered bright as a Septon's crystal, every crack and crevasse limned by sunlight, as frozen rainbows danced and died behind translucent ripples. On days like this the wall was beautiful. Another lovely sight caught Brindon's eye as he made his way over to the horses. Val was amongst the small group of people Brindon and Jon had brought with them to the parley. Jon had brought 2 men of his and Ghost, while Brindon had taken small Janumber, Daisy Mormont, and Shadow. Any more might have been seen as a sign of fear, and 20 men would have been of no more use than 2 if Tormund had been intent on blood. Shadow was the only protection Brindon needed. The direwolf could sniff out foes, even those who hid their enmity behind smiles. Shadow was beside Val while Brindon noticed that Ghost was nowhere to be seen. His wife looked just as ravishing as ever, clad all in white, white woolen breeches tucked into high boots of bleached white leather, white bearskin cloak pinned at the shoulder with a carved weirwood face, white tunic with bone fastenings. Her breath was white as well, with her long braid the color of dark honey, and her cheeks flushed red from the cold. Where is Mance? Brindon asked, noticing the man responsible for this parley was not present. He went on ahead to see his son, Val replied. How did you fare with Tormund? As well as it could be. 3 days hence at dawn, Tormund's host will be passing through the wall. The boys would go first, to serve as hostages for their sire's loyalty, while the giants and the mammoths would take the long way around the wall to Eastwatch. And then we will be heading to Hardham, Val said. If all goes well, Brindon nodded, and then looked at Val. You still wish to come with us? He had tried to convince Val to remain behind while he, Mance, and Jon would head to Hardham, but Val insisted on accompanying them. She was nothing like those Southron ladies and could take care of herself, but Brindon still wished that she would remain at Castle Black. Val smiled. You still have much to learn about us, Stark. That he did. Brindon mounted his horse as Tormund's eldest son. Toreg brought up Val's horse for her. Tall Toreg, he was called amongst the free folk. He overtopped his father by a foot. As Val mounted her own horse, Jon and Tormund emerged from the tent, making their way over to them. I was beginning to wonder if you two lovebirds were ever going to come out of that tent. Brynden grinned. Ha! Tormund laughed. And here I was beginning to wonder if you had a heart, Stark. Jon smiled. We were just catching up. You'll have plenty time to do that once we're all behind the wall. It is time that we were on our way. Tormund agreed, giving his brother a hearty slap. Keep you two any longer, they'll like to think we ate you. Dawn, then. 3 days from now. The boys first. I heard you the first 10 times. Amandi think there was no trust between us. He spat. Boys first, Mammoths go the long way round. You make sure Eastwatch expects them. I'll make sure there's no fighting, nor rushing at your bloody gate. Nice and orderly we'll be, ducklings in a row. And me the mother duck. Ha! We will be ready for you then, Jon said, mounting his own horse. As will we. The wilderling chief ducked back inside his tent. And now the hard part awaits us, Brynden said, as they made their way back to the wall. Jon agreed. Tormund's wildlings watched them pass, peering out from tents and lean-tos beneath leafless trees. For every man of fighting age, Brynden saw 3 women and as many children, gaunt-faced things with hollow cheeks and staring eyes. When Mance Rayder had led the free folk down upon the wall, his followers drove large herds of sheep and goats and swine before them, but now the only animals to be seen were the mammoths. If not for the ferocity of the giants, those would have been slaughtered too, he did not doubt. There was a lot of meat on a mammoth's bones. Brynden saw signs of sickness too. That disquieted him more than he could say. If Tormund's band were starved and sick, what of the thousands who had followed Mother Mole to Hardham? Once they were done here, they would need to hurry to Eastwatch if they hoped to save the ones at Hardham. They rode the rest of the way in silence, Shadow and Ghost loping at their heels. Mormont's Raven followed them as far as the gate, then flapped upward as the rest of them dismounted. Horse went ahead with a brand to light the way through the icy tunnel. A small crowd of Black Brothers and Northern Lords was waiting by the gate when Brynden and his companions emerged south of the wall. Jon made his way over to his sworn brothers while Brynden approached his bannerman. The great Jon came forward to speak for the rest. If it please your grace, will it be peace or blood and iron? Peace, Brynden Stark replied. 3 days hence, Tormund Giantsbane will lead his people through the wall. As friends, not foes. How many? Harry on Karstark asked. 50,000, along with 300 giants and more than 200 mammoths. They will help the Night's Watch garrison their abandoned castles, the better to defend the wall. Those who cannot fight will be settled on the gift at Queenscrown. Queenscrown is a ruin, your grace, Old Flint said. It is, but given time it will be repaired along with the abandoned castles along the wall. Now, forgive me my lords, but I shall retire for the evening. Taking Val's hand, Brynden led her to the king's tower, with Shadow trailing behind them. Your kneelers are not pleased, Val told him. They have every right to be wary, Brynden said. I'm about to let 50,000 wildlings through the wall, people who have been raiding our lands and fighting the Night's Watch for years. We are walking on thin ice with this alliance. It will all be for naught if anything goes wrong. Then see to it that it doesn't. Your people are not the only ones wary of this alliance. They will not risk such an action unless provoked. Let us hope that you are right. His guards bowed their heads as they made their way into the tower and to their chambers. Smalljon and Dacy Mormont took their leave once they reached their chambers. Brynden and Val said no more after that. Once they were inside and shared a night of passion, all worries of what was to come forgotten for the night. 3 days had passed since then and Brynden found himself making his way over to the stables after breaking fast with Val and his bannerman. Out in the yard, the eastern sky had just begun to lighten. There was not a wisp of cloud in sight. His horse was saddled and bridled and waiting for him, as was his brother. Are you ready? Jon asked him. Brynden shrugged. Let's just get this over with. Their guards followed them as well. Jon had chosen 8 men in their prime as his guards while Brynden chose those who had fought beside him since the Green Fork. Val also accompanied them, as did Mance, despite the protests of his bannerman. Brynden wanted to show the free folk that he was serious about their alliance and they would believe it if they saw the king in the north and the king beyond the wall together as allies. A deep red blush had appeared in the east by the time they all assembled at the gate. The stars are going out, Brynden thought. When next they reappeared, they would be shining down upon a world forever changed. Brynden shared a look with Jon and nodded his head. It was time. "Open the gates," the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch said softly. "Open the gate." 700 feet above, the sentries heard and raised their war horns to their lips. The sound rang out, echoing off the wall and out across the world. One long blast. For 1,000 years or more, that sound had meant Rangers coming home. Today it meant something else. Today it called the free folk to their new homes. On either end of the long tunnel, gates swung open and iron bars unlocked. Dawn light shimmered on the ice above, pink and gold and purple. Jon's steward led them underneath the ice, lighting the way through the gloom of the tunnel with an iron lantern. Brynden and Jon followed, leading their horses. Then their guardsmen. After them came Lord Steward Bowen Marsh and his stewards, a score of them, every man assigned a task. Above, Ulmer of the Kingswood and the Great Jon had the wall. 200 of Castle Black and Brynden's best bowmen stood with them, ready to respond to any trouble down below with a rain of arrows. North of the wall, Tormund Giantsbane was waiting, mounted on a runty little garron that looked far too weedy to support his weight. His 2 remaining sons were with him, tall Torred and young Dryn, along with 80 warriors. "Ha!" Tormund called. "Guards, is it? Now where's the trust in that? You brought more men than we did." "So I did. Come here by me, lads. I want my folk to see you too, the king in the north and the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. They need to learn that you Kneelers and Crows need not to be feared." Like he was going to let that happen. Both Brynden and Jon whistled, and Shadow and Ghost came racing from the gate. Tormund's horse shied so hard that the wilderling almost lost his saddle. "Stay," Brynden and Jon ordered their wolves. "You two are black-hearted bastards." Tormund Hornblower lifted his own war horn to his lips. The sound of it echoed off the ice like rolling thunder, and the first of the free folk began to stream toward the gate. From dawn till dusk Brynden and Jon watched the wildlings pass. The hostages went first, boys between the ages of 8 and 16. "Your blood cries," Tormund declared. "I hope the wailing o' their poor mothers don't haunt your dreams at night." Some of the boys were led to the gate by a mother or a father, others by older siblings. More came alone. 14 and 15-year-old boys were almost men, and did not want to be seen clinging to a woman's skirts. 2 stewards counted the boys as they went by, noting each name on long sheepskin scrolls. A third collected their valuables for the toll and wrote that down as well. Not a single hostage balked or tried to slink away when his turn came to enter that gloomy tunnel. Almost all the boys were thin, some past the point of gauntness, with spindly shanks and arms like twigs. That was no more than Brynden expected. Elsewise they came in every shape and size and color. He saw tall boys and short boys, brown-haired boys and black-haired boys, honey blondes and strawberry blondes and redheads kissed by fire. He saw boys with scars, boys with limps, boys with pockmarked faces. Many of the older boys had downy cheeks or wispy little mustachios, but there was one fellow with a beard as thick as Tormund's. Some dressed in fine soft furs, some in boiled leather and oddments of armor, more in wool and sealskins, a few in rags. One was naked. Many had weapons, sharpened spears, stone-headed mauls, knives made of bone or stone or dragon glass, spiked clubs, tangle nets, even here and there a rust-eaten old sword. The Hornfoot boys walked blithe and barefoot through the snowdrifts. Other lads had bare paws on their boots and walked on top of the same drifts, never sinking through the crust. 6 boys arrived on horses, 2 on mules. A pair of brothers turned up with a goat. The biggest hostage was 6.5 feet tall but had a baby's face. The smallest was a runty boy who claimed 9 years but looked no more than 6. Of special note were the sons of men of renown. Tormund took care to point them out as they went by. "The boy there is the son of Soren Shieldbreaker," he said of one tall lad. "Him with the red hair, he's Jerick Kingsblood's get. Comes o' the line o' Raymond Redbeard, to hear him tell it. The line o' Redbeard's little brother, you want it true." 2 boys looked enough alike to be twins, but Tormund insisted they were cousins, born a year apart. One was sired by Howl the Huntsman, the other by Howl the Handsome, both on the same woman. Fathers hate each other. I was you, I'd send one to Eastwatch and t'other to your shadow tower. Other hostages were named as sons of Hound Wanderer, of Brooke, of Divin Sealskinner, Kyleg of the Wooden Ear, Morna White Mask, and the Great Walrus. Brindon was amused by the last one as John asked, the Great Walrus. Truly. They have queer names along the frozen shore. 3 hostages were sons of Alfin Crowkiller, an infamous raider slain by Khor in Half-Hand. Or so Tormund insisted. They do not look like brothers, his brother observed. Half-brothers, bore no different mothers. Alfin's member was a wee thing, even smaller than yours, Lord Crow, but he was never shy with where he stuck it. Had a son in every village, that one. Of a certain runty rat-faced boy, Tormund said, that one's a whelp of Varami Sixskins. Brindon had learned from John and Tormund that his sire was a skin changer. When 99 hostages had shuffled by them to pass beneath the wall, Tormund Giantsbane produced the last one. My son Dryn. You'll see he's well taken care of, or I'll cook your liver up and eat it. Brindon gave the boy a close inspection. Bran sh, though Dryn had none of Bran's sweetness, though. He was a chunky boy, with short legs, thick arms, and a wide red face, a miniature version of his father, with a shock of dark brown hair. He'll serve as my own page, Brindon promised Tormund, remembering the time when Elmarfrey had served as his squire. Hear that, Dryn. See that you don't get above yourself. To Brindon he said, he'll need a good beating from time to time. Be careful o' his teeth, though. He bites. He reached down for his horn again, raised it, and blew another blast. This time it was warriors who came forward. And not just 100 of them. Thousands of them, Brindon judged, as they moved out from beneath the trees. 1 in every 10 of them came mounted, but all of them came armed. Across their backs they bore round wicker shields covered with hides and boiled leather, displaying painted images of snakes and spiders, severed heads, bloody hammers, broken skulls, and demons. A few were clad in stolen steel, dinted oddments of armor looted from the corpses of fallen rangers. Others had armored themselves in bones. There were spearwives with them, long hair streaming. You might have sent the women first, Brindon heard John say to Tormund. The mothers and the maids. The wilderling gave them a shrewd look. I might have. And you crows and kneelers might decide to close that gate. A few fighters on the other side, well, that way the gate stays open, don't it? He grinned. I bought your bloody horse. Don't mean that we can't count his teeth. Now don't you go thinking me and mine don't trust you. We trust you just as much as you trust us. He snorted. You wanted warriors, didn't you? Well, there they are. Every one worth 6 o' your black crows or kneelers. Brindon had to smile. So long as they save those weapons for our common foe, I am content. Gave you my word on it, didn't I? The word of Tormund Giantsbane. Strong as iron, tease. He turned and spat. Amongst the stream of warriors were the fathers of many of Brindon's hostages. Some stared with cold dead eyes as they went by, fingering their sword hilts. Others smiled at him like long-lost kin, though a few of those smiles discomfited Brindon more than any glare. None knelt, but many gave him their oaths. What Tormund swore, I swear, declared black-haired Brooke, a man of few words. Soren's shield brake about his head an inch and growled, Soren's axe is yours, Brindon Stark, if ever you have need of such. Red-bearded Jerick Kingsblood brought 3 daughters. They will make fine wives, and give their husbands strong sons of royal blood, he boasted. Like their father, they are descended from Raymond Redbeard, who was king beyond the wall. Blood meant little and less amongst the free folk, Brindon recalled Val telling him. Jerick's daughters had flame-red hair, hung long and straight. Kissed by fire. 3 princesses, each lovelier than the last, he told their father. They shall serve as my queen's handmaidens. Val smiled. Now there's something I thought I would never have. Her tone was playful. Not even Dalla could boast of that. Hound Wanderer swore his oath upon his sword, as nicked and pitted a piece of iron as Brindon had ever seen. Divin Sealskinner presented him with a sealskin hat, Harl the huntsman with a bearclaw necklace. The warrior witch Morna removed her weirwood mask just long enough to kiss his gloved hand and swear to be his man or his woman, whichever he preferred. and on and on and on. As they passed, each warrior stripped off his treasures and tossed them into one of the carts that the stewards had placed before the gate. Amber pendants, golden torques, jeweled daggers, silver brooches set with gemstones, bracelets, rings, yellow cups and golden goblets, war horns and drinking horns, a green jade comb, a necklace of freshwater pearls, all yielded up and noted down by Bowen Marsh. One man surrendered a shirt of silver scales that had surely been made for some great lord. Another produced a broken sword with 3 sapphires in the hilt. And there were queer things, a toy mammoth made of actual mammoth hair, an ivory phallus, a helm made from a unicorn's head, complete with horn. Brindon hoped it would be enough for John and the Night's Watch to buy food supplies in the free cities. After the riders came the men of the frozen shore. Brindon watched a dozen of their big bone chariots roll past him one by one, clattering. Half still rolled as before, others had replaced their wheels with runners. They slid across the snowdrifts smoothly, where the wheeled chariots were foundering and sinking. The dogs that drew the chariots were fearsome beasts, as big as direwolves. Their women were clad in sealskins, some with infants at their breasts. Older children shuffled along behind their mothers and looked up at Brindon with eyes as dark and hard as the stones they clutched. Some of the men wore antlers on their hats, and some wore walrus tusks. The two sorts did not love each other, he soon gathered. A few thin reindeer brought up the rear, with the great dogs snapping at the heels of stragglers. "Be wary o' that lot," Brindon Stark Tormund warned him. "A savage folk. The men are bad, the women worse." On and on the wildlings came, as the sun crept across the bright blue sky. Just before midday, the movement stopped when an ox cart became jammed at a turn inside the tunnel. Brindon and John went to have a look themselves. The cart was now wedged solid. The men behind were threatening to hack it apart and butcher the ox where he stood, whilst the driver and his kin swore to kill them if they tried. With the help of Tormund and his son Toreg, they managed to keep the wildlings from coming to blood, but it took the best part of an hour before the way was opened again. "You need a bigger gate," Tormund complained with a sour look up at the sky, where a few clouds had blown in. "Too bloody slow this way. Like sucking the milk water through a reed. Ha! Would that I had the horn of Joramun. I'd give it a nice toot and we'd climb through the rubble. Then this alliance would all be for naught," Brindon told him. By afternoon the sun had gone, and the day turned grey and gusty. "A snow sky," Tormund announced grimly. Others had seen the same omen in those flat white clouds. It seemed to spur them on to haste. Tempers began to fray. One man was stabbed when he tried to slip in ahead of others who had been hours in the column. Toreg wrenched the knife away from his attacker, dragged both men from the press, and sent them back to the wildling camp to start again. The clouds had soon begun to roll in and Tormund turned and called out to his son Toreg. "Ride back to the camp and get them moving. The sick ones and the weak ones, the slugabeds and cravens, get them on their bloody feet. Set their bloody tents afire if you must. The gate must close at nightfall. Any man not through the wall by then had best pray the others get to him afore I do. You hear?" "I hear." Toreg put his heels into his horse and galloped back down the column. On and on the wildlings came. Clouds covered the sky from horizon to horizon, and warmth fled. There was more shoving at the gate, as men and goats and bullocks jostled each other out of the way. It is more than impatience, Brindon realized. They are afraid. Warriors, spearwives, raiders, they are frightened of those woods, of shadows moving through the trees. They want to put the wall between them before the night descends. The wildlings continued to pour through the wall. Some were moving faster now, hastening across the battleground. Others, the old, the young, the feeble, could scarce move at all. This morning the field had been covered with a thick blanket of old snow, its white crust shining in the sun. Now the field was brown and black and slimy. The passage of the free folk had turned the ground to mud and muck, wooden wheels and horses' hooves, runners of bone and horn and iron, pig trotters, heavy boots, the cloven feet of cows and bullocks, the bare black feet of the horn-foot folk, all had left their marks. The soft footing slowed the column even more. "You need a bigger gate," Tormund complained again. By late afternoon the snow was falling steadily, but the river of wildlings had dwindled to a stream. Columns of smoke rose from the trees where their camp had been. Tormund explained. Burning the dead. Always some who go to sleep and don't wake up. You find them in their tents, them as have tents, curled up and froze. Toreg knows what to do. The stream was no more than a trickle by the time Toreg emerged from the wood. With him rode a dozen mounted warriors armed with spears and swords. "My rearguard," Tormund said, with a gap-toothed smile. "You crows and kneelers have your scouts and rangers. So do we. Them I left in camp in case we were attacked before we all got out. Your best men. Or my worst. Every man o' them has killed a crow." Amongst the riders came one man afoot, with some big beast trotting at his heels. A boar, Bryndon saw. A monstrous boar. Twice the size of Shadow and Ghost, the creature was covered with coarse black hair, with tusks as long as a man's arm. Bryndon had never seen a boar so huge or ugly. The man beside him was no beauty either, hulking, black-browed, he had a flat nose, heavy jowls dark with stubble, small black close-set eyes. "Boruk." Tormund turned his head and spat. A skin changer. It was not a question. Somehow he knew. Shadow and Ghost turned their heads. The falling snow had masked the boar's scent, but now the black and white wolf had the smell. They padded out in front of them, teeth bared and snarling. "No." Bryndon and Jon ordered, trying to calm their wolves down. "Down. Stay. Stay." "Boars and wolves," said Tormund. "Best keep those beasts o' yours locked up tonight. I'll see that Boruk does the same with his pig." He glanced up at the darkening sky. "Them's the last, and none too soon. It's going to snow all night, I feel it. Time I had a look at what's on the other side of all that ice." "You two go ahead," Jon told Bryndon and Tormund. "I mean to be the last one through the ice. I will join you at the feast." "Feast? Ha! Now that's a word I like to hear." The wilderling turned his garron toward the wall and slapped her on the rump. Toreg and the riders followed, dismounting by the gate to lead their horses through. Bowen Marsh stayed long enough to supervise as his stewards pulled the last carts into the tunnel. "You sure?" Bryndon asked his brother. Jon nodded. "Go on. I've got things from here." Bryndon and Val then headed off toward the wall with their guards, leaving the Lord Commander and his black brothers behind. It's done, Bryndon thought, relieved that it was over. But he knew that the alliance between the North and the Free Folk was just beginning. Dragonstone looked just the same as Davos remembered it, grim and lonely. From the deck of his warship, Davos was not at all surprised to see that the port and town had been taken by the Lannisters and the Red Wine fleet, as they had left but a token force under the command of Sir Roland Storm when they had sailed north. Across the sea war horns boomed, as burning projectiles were launched from the catapults of their ships at the Red Wine fleet. "Fire!" Davos ordered, and his crewmen rushed to obey, loosing another projectile from their catapult at the enemy fleet. He watched as a few of the Red Wine ships were on fire, burning and sinking into Blackwater Bay. It was well known that Lord Paxter Redwine owned 200 warships, and 5 times as many merchant carracks, winecogs, trading galleys, and whalers. During the War of the Five Kings, Lord Mondaly had managed to construct a fleet of 150 warships. With the 29 ships of Salad Horsaran, Davos hoped that their numbers would be enough to lift the siege and transport the Dragonglass back to the wall. Stannis had decreed that they would split their fleet, with Davos leading the first strike against the Red Wine fleet. Unlike Sir Imry Florent, who had led their fleet to their doom, Davos would not do the same with the Mondaly fleet. Amongst the burning wreckage of ships, Davos spotted the Ubber Queen with war galleys flanking her. Roughly the same size as the Fury, Davos could make out her 3 great burgundy sails, remembering when the Red Wine fleet and the Royal fleet under Stannis's command had fought side by side during Greyjoy's rebellion. Beyond the line of warships, Davos searched the waters surrounding Dragonstone. Stannis would wait until Lord Redwine committed all of his forces into battle before launching his attack. The waiting would be hard, but patience was the key in this battle if they hoped to emerge victorious. This time they were the ones setting a trap for the enemy fleet. They kept their distance as planned, launching burning projectiles at the Red Wine fleet, showing no mercy to their foes. Though he was far away to not hear the screams of the dying men, Davos could imagine their cries as they drowned and burned, remembering all the men they had lost in the Blackwater rush to the wildfire, including 4 of his sons. Their deaths would not be in vain, Davos told himself. The Red Wine Fleet were putting up a good fight, that much was for certain. Despite having struck the first blow, the enemy had the numbers and were slowly forming their own battle lines. Davos prayed that Lord Redwine did not sense a trap as their warships formed up. Realizing that they had taken the bait, Davos shouted, "Battle speed!" The war horns repeated his command as the Red Wine Fleet began to charge in their direction. Drums began to beat furiously, oars rose and fell, and they surged forward. Their warships continued to launch burning projectiles at the enemy fleet, urging their foes to pick up speed. Sailing past the wreckage of their surprise attack, as the enemy got closer to them. Searching the port for signs of any stragglers, Davos was relieved that the port was empty of enemy ships. As their ships drew ever closer, Davos shouted, "Evade!" The war horns repeated his command and swerving in the direction of Dragonstone, several warships broke off from the battle line, making their way to the shores, where the Lannister host waited for them. As for Davos, he watched as two galleys came together, a great rending crash echoing across the water. Loose Davos commanded and his bowmen sent a withering rain of shafts across the water. He heard the men across the water scream as the arrows hit their mark. The ships that had broken off earlier drove toward the shore, sliding out a plank. Archers scrambled into the shallows, holding their bows high over their heads to keep the strings dry. They splashed ashore on the narrow strand beneath the bluffs. The Northmen charged at the surprised Lannister army while archers from the walls of Dragonstone emerged and loosed arrows at the lions. The call came from behind him and Davos swerved around as Stannis and his warships joined the fight, no doubt surprising the charging Red Wine Fleet while Davos's ships swerved around to take them from behind. It was all chaos after that. The Red Wine Fleet was forced to fall back after suffering a heavy loss, leaving the Lannisters stranded on the island. Dragonstone was theirs again. Chapter 23, Dragosteel. Enjoy and review. Jaime never thought that he would be in a cell again, yet here he was, stuck in one with Sir Adam Marbrand for company on Dragonstone. He still couldn't believe how easily he had been defeated by Stannis Baratheon. This was not at all the kind of situation he was expecting to be in when he had arrived on Dragonstone. First Robb Stark and now Stannis Baratheon. Some Lord Commander he was turning out to be. He remembered the look Sir Roland Storm gave him when he was thrown into the cell. A one-handed knight who had been captured twice. Once again Jaime cursed Brynden Stark for the hand he had taken and the aid he had provided to Stannis Baratheon, allowing the false king to break the siege of Dragonstone. They had all believed Stannis Baratheon to be defeated after the Blackwater, but he had only come back stronger after returning south. The Baratheon-Stark alliance could be an even greater threat to their rule if the king in the north turned his attention south. All Brynden Stark had done since returning north was form an alliance with the wildlings and remain at the wall. Jaime couldn't help but wonder why Brynden Stark had not left the north after his return from the Iron Islands. He knew Stark's bastard brother was at the wall as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, but doubted that was the reason the king in the north remained on the wall with his army. Stark could have used their recent defeats to his advantage and wiped out their remaining forces in the south, yet had done nothing. It seemed to Jaime that the Black Wolf was more focused in the north than he was with the south. Brynden Stark was certainly a better ruler than the young wolf had been, that much Jaime was certain of. His brother had won the war on the battlefield and lost it in a bedchamber, whilst the Black Wolf had learned from his brother's mistakes and secured their kingdom from their enemies. Jaime didn't want to know what would happen to the Westerlands if Brynden Stark decided to do the same thing he had done to the Iron Islands. Had Tywin Lannister still been alive, Jaime wondered how his Lord Father would have dealt with Brynden Stark and Stannis Baratheon. The two remaining kings that had survived the war were becoming more of a threat than the others who had crowned themselves king. Even with their recent defeats, the Tyrells were their only hope if they hoped to win this war. They still had the numbers, but Jaime knew that such trivial matters would not matter to men like Stannis Baratheon and Brynden Stark. He had learned that lesson in the Whispering Woods against the young wolf and now against Stannis Baratheon. Jaime doubted he would live long anyway to learn from his mistakes, as he had no doubt that Stannis Baratheon planned to burn him alive. The door to his cell swung open and Jaime looked up as a slight man entered, his low birth written plain upon a common face. He had thin shoulders and wore a leather glove on his maimed hand. Jaime knew at once that this man was Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight. Sir Davos Seaworth, or is it Lord Seaworth now? Has Stannis finally decided to have me burned alive? Would you believe me if I told you that he did not? Davos asked him. No, I would not, Jaime replied. Only a fool would think otherwise, and Jaime was no fool. If the Red Woman were here, it would be true, but she is not. His Grace has decided to leave your fate in the hands of Brynden Stark for helping us take back Dragonstone. No doubt Stark will be pleased to see me again. Jaime could already imagine the pleased look on Stark's face when he took his head. He doubted that the Black Wolf would force him to take the black. Jaime would rather die with a sword in hand than be forced to serve the remainder of his days on the wall and freeze to death in the north. What about the rest of us? Sir Adam asked. The Night's Watch could always use more men like you at the wall. Davos replied. What is the point in the Night's Watch anymore if all of the wildlings are behind the wall? Jaime asked. Jaime could care less about what happened at the wall, but even he knew that the Night's Watch served to defend the wall against the wilderling savages. Not to mention Grumpkins and Snooks. With the new alliance between the North and the wildlings, Jaime couldn't see what purpose the Night's Watch served now. The wildlings are not the true threat beyond the wall, Davos told him before taking his leave. Your ranging to Hardham is doomed to fail. Lady Melisandre's words echoed in Jon's mind as his men got ready to set sail from Eastwatch by the sea. Lord Marndale had come through with Brynden's request and had sent 7 ships from White Harbour, bringing their fleet to a total of 11 ships. Hopefully they would be enough to bring all of the wildlings at Hardham across the wall. From what Tormund had told them, he estimated their numbers to be half of what Manst's host was before they attacked the wall. He could only hope they weren't too late and they could be saved. Yet Lady Melisandre's words continued to haunt him, wondering if her words were true. Jon only wished that his brother did not have to come with them, but Brynden insisted he had no choice, believing the wildlings would only accept their offer if they saw the king in the north, the king beyond the wall, and the Lord Commander together, presenting the wildlings with their offer. This is a fool's errand, Lord Commander Cotter Pike told him as Brynden approached them with Shadow trailing behind him. The Night's Watch are the shield that guards the realms of men, and whether we like it or not, the wildlings are now our responsibility as well, Jon replied. Jon couldn't help but wonder how Cotter Pike felt about working alongside Brynden, for he was the man who had put all of his people to the sword. He only hoped the man was like Lord Commander Hoare and would maintain neutrality during their journey beyond the wall. As you say, Cotter took his leave, making his way over to his ship, the Talon. Seems I'm not the only one dealing with opposition from my men, Brynden said as he stopped in front of Jon, clad in his Valyrian steel armor with ice strapped across his back. Is it that easy to tell? Jon asked, looking at some of his black brothers board a ship. Brynden nodded, frowning. Even my own men are still not pleased working alongside wildlings. Val was right when she said that our marriage would not be enough to bridge an alliance between the North and her people. Once they see the true threat beyond the wall, they will have to learn to work together, Jon said. You truly believe that this alliance can work if they saw the others were Rhaegal? I have to. I saw a white with my own eyes and watched it die. Jon was still haunted by the blue-eyed corpse that had tried to kill him and Lord Commander Mormont. We cannot hope to defeat this enemy on our own. Then let us hope that Stannis comes through on his end. As much as I hate to admit it, he is our only ally for the wars to come. Stannis is not the only one out there. Jon pointed out. Wildlings are one thing, but Lannisters, never. They are the reason why we went to war. They are responsible for the deaths of my men, of Robb, and father. Brynden snapped, balling his hands into fists. The Knights of the Vale and Stannis are the only allies I need for the wars to come. I do not like the idea either, but we need more men. Who else would you have in mind if not the Lannisters? We will speak no more about this matter, Lord Commander. Brynden swiftly took off, heading for his ship. Jon wanted to call out to his brother, but knew that Brynden would not listen to him once he got angry. He would need to wait until his brother had cooled down before Jon could broach the subject to him again. Even with their growing alliance, Jon had a feeling that it would not be enough to stop the others and their army. His brother's army was stretched thin as it was, with the Blackfish leading a northern force in the Westerlands, Sir Helman Tallheart holding Moat Cailin, the Marndale fleet attacking Dragonstone, and his brother leading a force beyond the wall. If the others decided to attack, Jon doubted they would be able to last very long against them. "Looks like you and your brother didn't come to an agreement." Jon looked behind him as Tormund approached, stopping beside him. "It wouldn't be the first time." "What did you say to piss him off?" "I suggested he form an alliance with his enemies," Jon replied. Even he did not like the idea of fighting alongside Lannisters, but with their alliance with the Tyrells and the Freys, the Iron Throne controlled one of the biggest forces in the south, and they needed all the men they could get for the coming threat. "He did it with us. What is so different this time?" "They are the reason why the North went to war and declared their independence," Jon replied. Though there was bad blood between the North and the Wildlings, Jon knew that it was worse with the Lannisters, with the scars from the war still fresh in their minds. Then there was the Red Wedding, where many Northerners had lost their friends and family in the slaughter. "Mayhaps Val could convince your brother," Tormund chuckled. "It's not that simple. Besides, Brynden is still not pleased with Val accompanying us beyond the wall." Brynden had tried in vain to convince Val to stay behind at Castle Black, but the Wildling Queen refused to obey him. Jon knew that it was a futile attempt, but his brother did not know that. "Val will do what she wants. She is not at all like those Southron ladies your brother is used to dealing with, Jon Snow." "I think he's starting to realize that." Shouts could be heard from the docks as Wildlings, Black Brothers, and Northmen alike boarded the ships. A light snow had begun to fall and Jon hoped they would be able to make it in time to rescue the Wildlings at Hardham. "Time we were on our way," Tormund muttered. "Aye. Then he would see if Lady Melisandre's words were true or not." "How many did we lose?" "Too many," Your Grace, Oren Waters replied, kneeling before her in the throne room. Cersei seethed in silence, cursing Stannis Baratheon and Brynden Stark for making a fool of her. Jaime had failed her, falling once again to another attacker during a siege. She would make Stark and Baratheon pay dearly for inflicting such a loss upon her. They were proving to be more troublesome than she had believed. "What of Sir Jaime? Do you know what happened to the Lord Commander?" "As we were fleeing, Sir Jaime's forces were overrun on the beachhead by Baratheon forces. We could not make it in time to save them, Your Grace." "And our fleet?" Jaime and Oren Waters had set sail for Dragonstone with over 2,000 men, her newly built dromons, and the Red Wine fleet. Their numbers should have been more than enough to overwhelm what remained of Stannis' garrison at Dragonstone. Just like his liege lord, Redwyne proved to be just as incompetent as the Fat Flower was. How could her father ever have believed they needed the Tyrells to help end the war? "We lost just as many ships as we did men," Oren replied. 5 of our dromons were captured while the Redwyne fleet was decimated and forced to retreat. Lord Redwyne reports only 100 of his warships remain. What about this Mandaeally fleet? Wyman Mandaeally was not at all the kind of fool they had been led to believe if he had managed to construct a fleet on par with the Redwynes. The fat northerner would also pay for his transgressions against the Iron Throne. "They suffered minor losses, Your Grace. These Northmen are even more fearsome than before." Pycelle spoke up. She had almost forgotten that the old fool was at court with them. "The Maester rarely did anything but sleep these days. Cersei wouldn't be surprised if he died without any of them realizing it." "No doubt they still blame us for the Red Wedding," Cersei muttered. The younger Stark was proving to be an even greater threat than that of Robb Stark. She would have to find some way to deal with him, and soon. Hopefully the Northern Lords would turn on him because of his recent alliance with the Wildlings. From what Qyburn had told her, the Northmen and Night's Watch were not at all pleased with the recent actions of their king and Lord Commander. Stark was a fool to take a Wildling woman as his wife instead of a daughter from one of his bannermen. Just like his brother, Stark would also lose his kingdom in a bedchamber. Then there was Jon Snow, the new Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. The boy was proving to be even more traitorous, like Lord Eddard. "It is the Freys they should be blaming, not us," Orton Merryweather pointed out. "Only a fool would believe the Freys capable of taking such drastic actions on their own without any incentive. Roose Bolton would have been rewarded as well had he not decided to back out of the deal. That had cost the man his life and that of his house. Were he still alive, Lord Bolton would be the one dealing with Stark while she could focus all of her attention on Stannis. Instead she was left alone to clean up the mess her father had failed to do before his untimely demise. Now that Jaime was captured once again, Circe needed to deal with her enemies as quickly as possible to ensure her reign and Tommen's was secure. What news is there of the West? Soloras stepped forward, kneeling before he spoke. She would need to find some way to get rid of his presence before this day was done. The Blackfish continues to plunder the Westerlands unopposed, Your Grace. One setback after another. Were all the men around her so incompetent that she would have to do everything herself? And your brothers? I recall you telling me they would be able to muster 10,000 men within a fortnight. They are marching to the Golden Tooth as we speak, Your Grace. Good. Let us hope they can do what Sir Davin could not. And once the Blackfish was dealt with, that would be one less enemy she would have to worry about. Thousands of tents sprawled across the shorelines could be seen in the distance, along with fires burning inside cave mouths along a great grey cliff. War horns could be heard moaning as wildlings emerged from their tents to see what all the commotion was about. The only defense the wildlings seemed to have was a massive wooden wall, stretching from the cliff towards the other side of the peninsula. It was still hard for Brynden to believe they had all come here to the ruins of Hardham, heeding the words of some woods witch. They were all fools to come here, but they were his people now, whether they liked it or not, and it was Brynden's duty to see them south and behind the wall. He only hoped Mance and Tormund would be able to keep the wildlings in line once they boarded the ships. It was still strange for Brynden to work alongside the king beyond the wall, but then again these were strange times when Northmen, Black Brothers, and wildlings alike were working together against their common foe. Even if Brynden had his doubts still about the others and their existence. Despite his recent fight with Jon, Brynden trusted his brother and knew he would not lie about such a thing. The boats are ready, Your Grace, Smalljanumber announced. Then let's get this over with, Brynden muttered, turning around and headed across the deck to where the boats were being lowered into the water. He frowned when he saw Val waiting for him, wearing a large bearskin cloak, and a long bone knife strapped to her hip. You don't need to come with us. Val rolled her eyes. I can take care of myself, Your Grace. You can, but you are a queen now, not a woman of the free folk anymore, Brynden pointed out. They have had this argument many times during their journey north of the wall that Brynden had grown tired of it, but he did not wish to see Val put herself in danger, no matter how much she believed in her own capabilities. Sooner or later, Val needed to understand the role she was given as the Queen of the North, just as Brynden had when he had succeeded Robb as King in the North. You still have much to learn, Brynden Stark. Val smirked before getting on board one of the boats. Shadow started to pad forward, but Brynden stopped the wolf from jumping in. Not this time, boy. He got into the boat along with some of his guards while Gratian came over to see him off. Lord Umber, I leave you in command of the fleet while we are away. I hope you know what you are getting yourself into, Your Grace, Gratian grumbled. So do I. Brynden nodded, and they were slowly lowered into the water before making their way to the shorelines. There were thousands of wildlings gathered about along the shore, watching them make it across the harbour. Brynden was grateful that none of them had loosed any arrows at them as they made it ashore. Jon, Mance, and Tormund joined Brynden and Val as they disembarked and made their way over to where the wildlings were gathered. A scrawny old woman came forward, followed by a dull-looking warrior, clad in bronze with a bronze longsword strapped to his belt. Brynden recognized the Doe warrior as Athen, remembering the young Magna of Than, Sigorn. Let me handle this, Mance told Brynden, stepping forward to greet the wildlings with Tormund by his side. Mance, and here I thought you were dead, the Dorthan greeted. Not yet, Mance replied. What are you doing here with crows and kneelers? They are our salvation, the old woman interrupted. This time it was Jon who stepped forward. Your people have been granted safe passage through the wall. And why is that? The Than asked. Because we are no longer enemies, Brynden replied, standing beside Mance and Jon. My name is Brynden Stark, King in the North and Lord of Winterfell. It is by my decree and the terms of our alliance that we are here. Why should we trust the words of a Stark? A beautiful spearwife, with long dark hair and grey eyes, asked. Because he understands that he needs us, just as much as we need him, Mance replied. You don't need to bend your knee for him or call him your king, only that you answer his summons when our true enemy comes. Why should we? He was one of the Southron kings that cut our army into pieces, another wilderling chieftain pointed out, and his fellow brethren nodded their heads in agreement. I was only defending my kingdom, Brynden snapped. Any other king would have done the same, even if it meant slaughtering thousands to drive their enemies away. So why the sudden change of heart? First you defend your wall against us and now you're letting us through it. Smells more like a trap and that this lot with you are nothing more than traitors. The Dothan growled. You all know what's out there, what's coming for us, Mance said. We can't hope to stand against them alone. None of us here likes each other and that's understandable, Brynden added. For centuries our people have been fighting each other with no end in sight, but that ends today. Desperate times call for desperate measures and we all need to learn to band together if we hope to beat the White Walkers. The Wildling Spearwife scoffed. Beat the White Walkers? Run from them maybe. The White Walkers can be defeated. Jon stepped forward, taking a dagger from his belt and handing it over to the wildlings. A man of the Night's Watch slew a White Walker with that dagger. It is dragon glass, what the Maesters call obsidian. You saw this? Dathan asked. No, but I trust the man, Jon replied. As we speak, Stannis Baratheon is in the south, mining the obsidian and shipping them north. Brynden informed them. Your best chance for survival is to come with us south of the wall. The wildlings looked at each other, murmuring to one another while the dragon glass dagger was passed around. Brynden wished they could have this meeting inside, but none of the wildlings seemed interested in letting them into the camp. At least with Tormund, the wildlings had a leader Brynden could deal with, but these wildlings didn't seem to have a leader of their own. They also didn't seem to trust the words of their king, even with Mance trying to convince them of their alliance. So much for this being a simple rescue. Of course, things were never simple when dealing with wildlings, Brynden mused, glancing at Val. Thousands of our people are already settled behind the wall. Val stepped in. Stark will remain true to his word, you have my word. And why is that? The Spearwife asked. Because I am his queen, Val replied, causing the wildlings to whisper amongst themselves once more. It's true, Brynden added. To cement our alliance I have taken one of your own as my wife and queen, as well as sparing the life of your own king, Mance Rayder. The long night is coming and the dead come with it, Jon said. Only together do we have a chance to stop them. What say you, Mance? Do you believe this is the way? One of the chieftains asked. I do, Mance nodded. I'm with Mance. We came here anyways looking for salvation and it seems that they are it. Another chieftain stepped in. Several others agreed with him, nodding their heads. We are with you, Stark, the old woman added. Brynden nodded, grateful that it didn't take long for them to accept. He didn't want to be out here any longer than he had to. He made his way over to Val and pulled her aside as the chieftains headed off to inform their people of the news. I want you on one of the first boats back to the fleet, Brynden told her. Val gave him a playful smile as if to mock him. If my king insists. A while later, wildlings were boarding the boats, making their way across the harbor to the fleet while Brynden, Jon, Mance, and their men kept order amongst their ranks. It was a strange sight to behold as Black brothers and Northmen helped wildlings onto the boat. Not for the first time, Brynden couldn't help but wonder if 11 ships were enough for 50,000 wildlings, including their own men. 300 men they had brought with them, with Brynden, Jon, and Mance bringing 100 men each. They should have brought more ships, but the bulk of the Mandaeally fleet had already set sail for Dragonstone, leaving only a few ships for Lord Mandaeally to spare, with the Night's Watch only able to deploy a small number of ships to the fleet. He wondered if they would have enough time to make several trips. For now though, Brynden had given orders to let only the young ones, women, and fighting men on board first. The old ones would only slow them down and they would need all the able bodies they could get, even if it meant leaving people behind. There were always sacrifices in war, as Brynden had learned on the Green Fork. He had sacrificed a few to save the many while Brynden had accomplished his goal of distracting Lord Tywine while Robb had lifted the siege of Riverrun. The battle felt like ages ago for Brynden back when he was just the second son, not a prince or a king. Now look at him, the king in the north and the first Stark of Winterfell to allow wildlings through the wall. It should have been father or Robb dealing with this matter, not him, but they were gone now, leaving him alone to defend their house against their enemies. You have a good heart, Brynden Stark, Mance told him, approaching him from the side. You have my thanks for what you have done for my people. It is not needed. They became my people and responsibility the moment I agreed to the alliance and took Val as my queen. Suddenly a heavy snow had begun to fall and the horns blew from the wooden wall. They had set up sentries along the wall, consisting of Black Brothers and wildlings from Tormund's group to keep the flow of wildlings in line while they passed through the gates. A second blast came and Brindon looked at Mance. "More wildlings?" he asked, hoping that were true. Mance's face hardened when he heard the screams in the distance coming from the wall. "No." A third blast and Brindon watched as a cloud of snow fell down from the grey cliff onto the wildling camp below it. That was no natural storm, Brindon realized, as Black Brothers and wildlings drew their swords and spears and running toward the wall. "Tormund, with me!" Mance shouted, drawing his sword and rushing off with Tormund roaring. "Never thought I'd get another order from you," Tormund shouted, following the wildling king into battle. "Your Grace!" Harry shouted, making his way toward him through the panicking crowd rushing for the boats. "Gather our men and join me at the wall," Brindon ordered, drawing ice and making his way to where the fighting was. He may be a king, but it was not in Brindon's nature to run away from a battle. "Here they come," he heard a wildling say as Brindon spotted Jon amongst his Black Brothers. "Use fire arrows," another wildling shouted. Jon, Brindon called out, making his way over to his brother. Arrows whispered overhead, hitting their marks while the wind continued to howl about them. "You shouldn't be here," Jon told him. "And neither should you," Brindon shot back. "Mance can hold the wall, we need to bring order back at the shorelines." "White Walker." Brindon and Jon turned around, and to his disbelief found himself staring at another, pale as ice, gaunt and hard as old bones. Its armor rippled and shifted as it moved, and its feet did not break the crust of the snow. In its hand was a longsword like none that Brindon had ever seen. No human metal had gone into the forging of that blade. It was alive with moonlight, translucent, a shard of crystal so thin that it seemed almost to vanish when seen edge on. There was a faint blue shimmer to the thing, a ghost light that played around its edges. He couldn't believe what he was seeing as two Black Brothers charged at the thing, only to have their swords shatter upon contact with its blade before being cut down with ease. To his horror, Brindon watched as Jon charged at the other, swinging his sword at the monster. To his surprise, the sword did not shatter when it struck against the pale sword. "Jon!" Brindon cried out, ignoring the battle behind him as he joined his brother against the other, swinging ice at his foe. His instincts took over, with Brindon parrying while Jon struck out only for the other to parry their attacks with ease. The other moved like it was the wind, gracefully dodging while striking precise hits against their blades, searching for an opening. Stark and Snow struck as one, only to be pushed back and forced onto the defensive. No amount of training had prepared them for this. Brindon struggled to keep his foe at bay while Jon tried running his blade through the other. Snow fell heavily around them, hindering their movement. Suddenly ice was knocked from his grasp and Brindon raised his arm to shield himself, unsheathing the dagger from his belt and shoving it into its leg. He heard a crack, like the sound ice makes when it breaks beneath a man's foot, and then a screech so shrill and sharp that caused Brindon to muffle his ears. All about its body, the other's armor cracked until finally it shattered into pieces, leaving Brindon and Jon stunned from what had just happened. "Dagger steel," Brindon remembered, looking down at the dagger, recalling the conversation he and Jon had with Samwell Tarly about the weakness of the others. The armor of the others is proof against most ordinary blades, if the tales can be believed Sam had told them. And their own swords are so cold they shatter steel. Fire will dismay them, though, and they are vulnerable to obsidian. I found one account of the Long Night that spoke of the last hero slaying others with a blade of dagger steel. Supposedly they could not stand against it. It made sense, Brindon thought, reaching down and picking up the dagger along with ice. Valyrian steel was dagger steel. Jon made his way over to Brindon, breathing heavily. "Are you all right?" "I'm hoping that this is all just a dream," Brindon replied. The others were unlike any other foe he had faced before and did not want to go through that again. "Fall back." The wall began to creak and groan, causing Brindon and Jon to stare in dismay as a pile of bodies with blue eyes tore through the wall, overwhelming their position. "To the boats!" Jon ordered, and without seeing if they heard the order, began making a mad dash back to the shorelines. It was a massacre on the way to the boats. Piles of bodies decorated the ground while the few that lived struggled against their attackers. "Cast now," Brynden ordered, crossing the beach and hopping into the boat with Jon following in right after him. Turning around, Brynden could only watch in horror and dismay as those that were left behind were slaughtered by dead men. The screams of the living were silenced after a while. Then just as quickly as they had fallen, the fallen rose, joining the ranks of the dead, with thousands of blue eyes staring back at him. Breathing heavily, it was then that Brynden realized that they could not possibly hope to defeat this foe alone. Chapter 24, The Wolf and the Falcon. Back from the dead bitches, LOL. It's been 2 years since I've updated this story and I know a lot of you have been asking for an update. And with the last season airing today, I figured why not, as I have some free time now. Unfortunately I wasn't able to complete the Dance with Dragons storyline, but I at least have 2 more chapters completed and will upload them a week at a time because I want to pace myself this time in case I hit another writer's block or life gets in the way again. Though don't expect updates to be as frequent later on as I'll update whenever I can and when I have the time. This will also be the only story that I plan on focusing on for now, despite my interests writing for other fandoms, but I plan on finishing this story first since we're getting close to the end of Brynden Stark's journey, only 2 more books to go. It's been a while since I've touched this story, I know, and I skimmed through the previous chapters to make sure there weren't any continuity errors in this one. I did come back though and make some last-minute changes to this chapter to make it flow a bit better, which means that I will also be making some changes to the other chapters I finished. The next few chapters will definitely be better though, hopefully, since I'm getting a feel for the story again. Anyways, hope you all enjoy the long overdue chapter 24. Lady Melisandre's warning about their doomed ranging had turned out to be true. Just as Lord Commander Mormont had lost against the others at the Fist of the First Men, Jon and Brynden had lost against them at Hardham. It was a failure in Jon's mind. They had sailed for Hardham to rescue all of the wildlings there, only to return with 20,000 of them while losing Mance in the first wave the others had launched against them. Not even Tormund could figure out why the others would attack them at such full strength during the day. Jon remembered what Tormund had told him and Brynden on the day they had let the wildlings through the wall. They won't come out by day, not when that old sun's shining, but don't think that means they went away. Shadows never go away. Might be you don't see them, but they're always clinging to your heels. So much for the others not attacking while the sun was up. The only useful information they had managed to gather at Hardham was that Valyrian steel could also kill the others and that when one of them died, the whites they had resurrected would perish as well. It was only thanks to the survivors that Jon had learned about the whites falling, for he was too busy focused on the other that had almost killed his brother were it not for his Valyrian steel armor. None of that in Jon's mind was worth the loss of 30,000 wildlings and that of Mance. Now they had 30,000 more whites to deal with in the army of the others. When the time came to face the others, Jon wondered if their alliance would be able to stand a chance against them. It was only a matter of time now before the others decided to attack the wall, and they all would need to be ready to stop them. Even when I had my doubts about their existence, you were right the entire time about them. Jon looked up as Brynden entered the room, with an exhausted look on his face. You have to see them to believe it, Jon said, remembering all too well of his first encounter with a white in Lord Commander Mormont's chambers. The long night is coming and the others will soon be upon us. And we can't hope to beat them alone, not after what I had just witnessed. Brynden sighed, sitting down on a chair in front of Jon's desk. We need more allies, Jon told his brother. Stannis and the Knights of the Vale won't be enough to stop them when they come. They were right back at the same conversation they had at Eastwatch before sailing for Hardham, only this time Brynden knew what was out there and what was coming for them. Jon knew how much Brynden despised the Lannisters and the South for what happened during the War of the Five Kings, but they needed to put their differences aside if they hoped to survive the coming storm. You and I both know the Lannisters will never join us after everything that has happened. I doubt the River Lords will lend their aid either after I had abandoned them. Not to mention that Dorne and the Tyrells are sworn to the Iron Throne. You can forget about the Ironborn as well, considering what had happened to them. Jon frowned, knowing all too well what Brynden meant. He still couldn't believe that the brother he had grown up with was capable of such an atrocity. That was something he would expect a man like Tywin Lannister would be able to do. They didn't deserve that fate. No one deserves that, Jon muttered. Brynden scoffed. You are still naive sometimes, Jon. If the Ironborn had been allowed to live, they would have continued their ways of plundering and raiding until another Balon Greyjoy or Euron appeared, bringing even more devastation and death to the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. What of Lyanna? She has the blood of the Ironborn flowing through her veins, Jon pointed out. My daughter may have the blood of an Ironborn, but she has and always will be a Stark, a woman of the North. Brynden frowned. Jon sighed, realizing that his brother would never change his mind once he was set on something. So, how do you plan on dealing with the looming threat of the others? I plan on evacuating all those who cannot fight to the Iron Islands. That way we can at least lower the casualties of the living should they manage to breach the wall. I take it you plan to use the Winter Fleet to ferry them across. Of course. I sent a raven to the Blackfish, ordering him to return to the north. From what I've heard from the south, it would seem that the Lannisters took the bait and are sending a large force to the Westerlands as we speak. Jon smiled. And should Stannis decide to rally more men in the south, it will take some time for the enemy to return from the Westerlands. Brynden drummed his fingers on Jon's desk. Then there's the matter with the Riverlands. I have no doubt that the River Lords are not pleased with being under Lannister rule, but whether they decide to join Stannis or not depends on if they still blame me for abandoning them to the Lions. You had no choice, you said so yourself. You even gave them a chance to join you in the north when you decided to flee. Had you decided to stay, you would have been surrounded on all sides and met the same fate as Robb. You're right, but it still doesn't make me feel any better about it. I gave up half of the kingdom Robb fought for in order to defend our home. Those River Lords most likely call me the king who ran by now. Brynden chuckled. It was a difficult situation either way. In my eyes you made the right decision, and I believe your bannermen see it that way as well. In the end I will have to live with the decisions I have made for the rest of my life. Brynden sighed. He then stood up and made his way out of the chambers before stopping and looking over his shoulder. You should get some rest, Jon. You and I both deserve some after that whole ordeal. Easier said than done. Yet when Jon drifted off to sleep that night, all he dreamt about were an army of blue eyes staring at him, marching on the wall while wolves howled into the night. Sansa still couldn't believe this was real. As she gazed at the mirror, admiring her new wedding gown. The small clothes were all silk, but the gown itself was ivory samite and cloth of silver, and lined with silvery satin. The points of the long dagged sleeves almost touched the ground when she lowered her arms. And it was a woman's gown, not a little girl's, there was no doubt of that. The bodice was slashed in front almost to her belly, the deep V covered over with a panel of ornate Mirish lace in dove grey. The skirts were long and full, the waist so tight that Sansa had to hold her breath as the seamstress laced her into it. If only your brother were here to see how beautiful you look, her mother said when she was dressed. Will I be able to see him again after I am wed? Sansa asked her mother, knowing that it was thanks to Brynden that was she free from the Lannisters and Joffrey. Of course. Her mother smiled. We will be sailing for White Harbor so that your husband can swear fealty to your brother. I still can't believe this is happening. A week had passed since Robert Arryn had passed, and after the Lords Declarant had thrown Littlefinger into the Sky Cells, they had decided to proceed with the wedding after Sir Harold Hardang had ascended as Lord Harold Arryn, Defender of the Vale and Lord of the Eyrie. Many Lords of the Vale had arrived at the Eyrie for the wedding and to swear fealty to their new lord. If only your father and Robb were here, they would be so proud of you to see how you have grown. Soon you will be the Lady of the Eyrie and the envy of every highborn maiden in the Vale, and a few from the Riverlands and the Reach as well. I miss them, Sansa muttered, remembering the last moment she had shared with her father before his execution, arguing with him. She still couldn't bring herself to tell her mother that she had gone to the Queen that day, begging her to let her stay in King's Landing so that she could be with Joffrey. After the wedding she would tell her, Sansa promised to herself, as she was done keeping secrets from her family. Soon she would be home again and safe, away from the Lannisters. Her family would surely forgive her for her mistake. She was still only just a child back then after all, and she had paid for it as a hostage of the Iron Throne, enduring Joffrey's torments and beatings until Brynden had secured her release. She would never betray her family or house to anyone ever again. As do I. But enough about that, we don't want to sour your mood. You should be happy on your wedding day. Her mother smiled. Sansa pushed her thoughts of King's Landing and the Lannisters aside, and smiled, following her mother as she made her way over to the door and opened it, revealing Brian of Tarth standing guard outside her chambers, wearing a doublet instead of a dress. My Lady Brian bowed when she noticed them. Making their way down the hallway, Sansa started to get nervous as they made their way to the September. While traditionally it would have been either her father or brother to present her to her husband, her mother had taken their place for the wedding. When they entered the September, Sansa blushed when she saw her soon-to-be husband, forgetting all about her troubles that plagued her mind. Harold looked every inch a lord, clean-limbed and handsome, straight as a lance, hard with muscle. Men old enough to have known Jon Arryn in his youth said Sir Harold had his look, she knew. He had a mop of sandy blonde hair, pale blue eyes, and an aquiline nose. For the wedding he wore a doublet of cream and blue, blazoned with the arms of Hardang and Waynwood displayed in the first and third quarters, but in the second and fourth quarters he bore the Moon and Falcon of House Arryn, sky blue and cream. Even with the knowledge of the bastards he had fathered, Sansa found him more appealing than Joffrey and knew that he was a better man than Joffrey when Harold had told her the truth about his bastards when she had asked him. All that she wanted was a husband who would care for her and not care about her name. She just hoped that she was right about him this time and he would treat her the same way father treated mother. Waiting for them at the marriage altar was the Septon, standing between the mother and the father to join their lives together. As they made their way to the altar, Sansa spotted Lord Yohn Royce and the rest of the Lords Declarant, along with a few northern lords who had accompanied them to the Vale. The ceremony passed as in a dream. The 7 vows were made, the 7 blessings invoked, and the 7 promises exchanged. When the wedding song had been sung and the challenge had gone unanswered, it was time for the exchange of cloaks. Her mother tenderly removed her maiden cloak, while Harold accepted the bride's cloak from Lady Anya Waynwood. Harold then approached Sansa and draped her in the sky blue and cream and leaned close to fasten it at her throat. "With this kiss I pledge my love," Harold declared, and Sansa echoed his words before Harold pulled her in close and kissed her long and deep. The Lords of the Vale cheered while the Septon declared Harold of the House of Arryn and Sansa of House Stark to be one flesh, one heart, one soul. Sir Gilbert Faring continues to hold Storm's End against the Tyrell forces led by Mace Tyrell. Mace Tyrell had raised a city of tents outside Storm's End and had 24 mangonels flinging stones against the castle's massive walls, thus far to small effect. Though Storm's End remained loyal to King Stannis's cause, Davos knew that it was only a matter of time before the Lannisters regained full control over the south. He doubted Brynden Stark the Black Wolf would be interested in lending his fleet against the Tyrell forces when his sole focus was on the Wall and the growing threat of the others. The Marndale fleet's only purpose at Dragonstone was to lift the siege and transport the dragonglass they mined back to the Wall. They had little interest in anything else but obeying their king's command, much to King Stannis's annoyance. Of their fleet, they only had 25 ships that belonged to Salad Horse Arryn, with the addition of the 5 dromons they had acquired from the Lannister fleet sent to retake Dragonstone. They needed more men and ships if they ever hoped to win the war and seat King Stannis, but the threat beyond the Wall came first. Even with the support of the Iron Bank, they had heard nothing from Sir Justin Massey, who had sailed for Braavos with their envoy, Tycho Nestris. Davos could only hope that Sir Justin would be able to accomplish the task the king had given him. They needed to win more allies in the 7 kingdoms if they hoped to prevail against the enemy beyond the Wall. The fat flower will be there for some time if it ends up like the last siege during Robert's rebellion, King Stannis snorted, standing behind a massive slab of wood carved and painted in the shape of Westeros as it had been in the time of Aegon the Conqueror. An iron brazier stood beside the king, its coals glowing a ruddy orange. 4 tall pointed windows looked out to north, south, east, and west. On the map Stannis had the Lion of Lannister placed on King's Landing, the Tyrell Flower and the Crowned Stag at Storm's End, the Direwolf of Stark at Winterfell, the Falcon at the Eyrie, the Son of Martell in Dorne, the Twins of the Freys at the Twins, and the Crowned Stag on Dragonstone. That may be so, Your Grace, but the Lannisters have most of the south under their control already, Davos pointed out. It is only a matter of time before Storm's End falls. The Freys of the Crossing now ruled the Riverlands as the Lords Paramount of the Trident, with many of the River Lords welcomed back into the King's peace. After the Red Wedding, however, Davos doubted that many of the River Lords were pleased with their new overlords. Only a few River Lords loyal to the Starks and Tullys had gone north after the Black Wolf had succeeded the Young Wolf as the king in the north. Not to mention the Stormlords who had gone over to Stannis after Renly's death only to bend the knee to the Lannisters when the Battle of the Blackwater was lost. Only a few in the Stormlands remained loyal to Stannis, including Storm's End. If the Stark boy had the sense of his father, I would be sitting on the Iron Throne by now with all my enemies defeated, and together we would destroy the Ice Demons, but the boy has made it clear that he will never bend the knee, Stannis muttered. After what happened to his lord father and brother, can you blame him, your grace? Davos asked. His reasons do not matter to me. He is an usurper like his brother and should have bent the knee when I helped him defend the wall against the wildlings. I did not help defend the north only to accept a broken kingdom. King Stannis gritted his teeth, looking down at the map of Westeros. Now that Stark has made an alliance with the Vale and the wildlings, he will become an even greater threat to my rule than he already is. His king took a piece of the map that was shaped like a falcon and placed it next to the direwolf in the north. The true threat is beyond the wall, Davos couldn't help but remind his king. Better the Knights of the Vale are allied with the Starks than with the Lannisters. And more enemies to deal with once I have the Iron Throne and the threat beyond the wall is dealt with. There is always the chance we can rally the River Lords to our cause, your grace. I know for certain that many of them are not content with Lannister rule and desire vengeance for the Red Wedding. King Stannis scoffed. After all of the losses they have suffered, the most these River Lords could raise would be at least 10,000 men. Not to mention they would dare not raise a sword with Edmure Tully still a prisoner to the Freys, but he is a dead man either way, and with the Tullys no longer in power, the River Lords who resent the Freys will look to someone else to follow. It is still better than none at all, Davos pointed out. True, but if Sir Justin comes through on his end, then there will be no need to rally the River Lords to our cause. However, thanks to the Blackfish raiding in the Westerlands, there are fewer enemies to deal with in the south. No doubt that was all part of Stark's plan. Not to mention that if the news they heard were true of Queen Margaery and Lady Cersei being imprisoned by the Faith, Davos had no doubt that Lord Tyrell would abandon the siege of Storm's End and march to King's Landing to demand his daughter's release. There was already infighting going on in the Lannister-Tyrell alliance, and it would be the perfect opportunity to rally the River Lords not loyal to the Freys to Stannis' cause, and mayhaps some Storm Lords and Crown Lords as well. Davos knew that Stannis was thinking about that as well as he gazed at the map of Westeros. Their war was no longer about the Iron Throne at the moment though, no matter how much Stannis complained about Brynden Stark and his refusal to bend the knee. And Davos was certain that Stannis knew that as well if his glances at the wall on the map were anything to go by. So how will you respond, your grace? Davos asked at last, breaking the silence in the room. King Stannis picked up the piece that was shaped like a flaming heart with the crowned stag enclosed in it, gazing at it for a moment before placing it in the Riverlands. The wedding ceremony for Sansa and Lord Harold Arryn were in full swing, yet Catelyn wasn't focused on them at the moment as she made her way to the Sky Cells with Brian trailing behind her. Two Arryn guards stood outside her destination, wearing silver mail armor and sky blue cloaks. My lady, they bowed when Catelyn stopped in front of them. Open it, she commanded, and they did as commanded before stepping to the side, swinging the door open, revealing the man she had once saw as her own brother. Petter's eyes shot up when he heard her voice. Cat, he muttered, struggling to stand up. He didn't look at all like the man she had seen a week ago. She supposed the Sky Cells could do that, a person, remembering when her sister had thrown Tyrion Lannister into one of the cells. Do not call me that, she snapped, causing Petter to flinch back at her tone. You lost that right when you betrayed my husband and family to the Lannisters. She had the Hound to thank for that when he had sworn his sword to Brynden's cause, informing them when questioned that it was Petter who had betrayed Ned that day, drawing a dagger at his neck. When she had told Lord Royce and the other lords, it had given them even more incentive to throw Petter in the Sky Cells without a trial or confession. They would leave his fate and judgment to her son when they returned to Winterfell. Lies, Petter tried to defend himself. I've loved you since I was a boy, I would never betray you. Then why are you still here serving the Lannisters while my husband is dead? You were always clever, but nothing you say will save you now. My son, the king in the north will decide your fate when we return to Winterfell. She ought to have him thrown through the moon door, but that would be too quick of a death for him. He deserved to suffer longer for his treachery and betrayal. I can help your son defeat his enemies. He may be a skilled warrior and commander like his brother, but I doubt he knows how to play the game. You can trust me. Caitlin was suddenly reminded of the dagger that had been used by the Catspaw on the attempt of Bran's life. She remembered her blind trust in Petter when he had told her that the dagger belonged to Tyrion Lannister, which had led up to the war against her family. She could still also remember Tyrion vehemently denying the dagger was his during their journey to the Eyrie. "You lied to me, betrayed my trust and that of my husband's. I would be a fool to believe in you again." She spun around and was about to leave the cell when the next few words that came out of Petter's mouth stopped her dead in her tracks. "Sansa also had a role with your husband's arrest. Thought you should know." "Lies," Caitlin thought, clutching her dress, her fingers digging into the skirt of her dress. Without another word, Caitlin left the cell, with Bran trailing behind her as she heard Petter call out her name and the door to his cell slam shut. Petter was lying, Caitlin told herself, refusing to believe that Sansa had played a part with Ned's death. He was just trying to drive a wedge between her family in his hopes that he would be spared from death. There was just no way that Sansa would betray Ned to the Lannisters. Unless it was for Joffrey, Caitlin thought, remembering how enamored Sansa was with the prince at Winterfell. After the wedding Caitlin would ask Sansa herself, and pray that what Petter had told her was all just a lie. Waiting for him in his quarters were the three best fighters Brynden could come up with from both the North and the Free Folk. Only one of them bowed to him as he entered the room. "You wanted to speak with us, Your Grace?" Smalljan Umber asked. Without replying, Brynden made his way over to where the three Valyrian steel swords he had claimed from Euron Greyjoy and the Iron Islands were and picked up one of them before turning around, surprising the other occupants in the room. "The long night is coming and the dead come with it. We've all seen it, which is why I've called you three here." Brynden stepped in front of Smalljan, tightening his grip over Brightraw. "Valyrian steel can kill the others and luckily for us we have three Valyrian steel swords without an owner. As a number I figured you would be the most suitable for Brightraw." "Your Grace," Smalljan started, but Brynden cut him off. "You've rode with me since the Green Fork and your house has served mine faithfully for generations. You and your house have earned the right to wield this sword." "What of my father?" Brynden smiled. "I've already spoken to the Great Jon of the matter. He doesn't mind if it is you since you are the future of your house. Now take it before I decide to give it to someone else." "Thank you, Your Grace." Smalljan accepted Brightraw gratefully from Brynden. "I swear my house will remember this moment for generations to come. When you have the time you should see about getting the name and pommel changed," Brynden suggested. "It is an Umber sword now, not a Lannister one." Smalljan chuckled. "I will, Your Grace." Nodding his head in approval, Brynden made his way back over to where the Valyrian swords were and picked up Red Rain before standing in front of the man who had brought his younger sister safely home. Clegane raised an eyebrow at him as Brynden offered him the sword. "Didn't think you had that much faith in me. You're a great fighter and that's what we need right now if we hope to survive the wars to come. You'll need it if you will be fighting by my side." He turned the blade and pointed the pommel to Clegane who immediately wrenched it away from his grasp. Strapping it to his belt, Clegane nodded and Brynden left to pick up the last sword and made his way over to the final person in the room. "Our people have been enemies for as long as I can remember until now. I named you to my guard because my brother trusts your father and to bridge the gap between our people. My marriage to one of your own and this sword will hopefully continue to mend the hostility between us. What say you, Toreg, son of Tormund?" Toreg grinned as he accepted the blade. "I say that I'll use this blade to take down all those icefuckers until not a single one is left." Brynden chuckled. "So long as it is used against the enemies of the North, that is all that matters to me. You are all free to go now." Smalljan bowed while Toreg strapped Nightfall to his belt before taking their leave, leaving Brynden alone to his thoughts. Sighing in relief that it was all over, Brynden made his way back over to his desk before collapsing into his chair, massaging his forehead to clear his thoughts. There were now 5 Valyrian steel swords in use in the North, and yet Brynden knew it would not be enough against the others. He had seen the way they had moved and fought in combat, and without their wights, Brynden was certain they would be able to overwhelm them by themselves. He shuddered at the thought of facing an army of them. That was why he couldn't stay at the wall any longer. He needed to return to Winterfell, summon his bannermen, and discuss their next move. Jon could hold the wall until he returned. With the North, Free Folk, and the Night's Watch working together against their common foe, there was no need for Brynden to overstay his welcome. He had accomplished what he had set out to do at the wall. He had made a truce with Stannis Baratheon, formed an alliance with the Free Folk, and had seen the others up close and personal. It was time for him to leave and prepare his people for the coming storm. If the wall was still here when he returned with more men, Brynden prayed that they would be ready. Standing up, Brynden made his way over to the door and opened it to speak with the guards outside. "Inform my bannermen to mobilize their men. We march for Winterfell at dawn. Your Grace." One of his guards bowed before taking his leave. He then sent the other guard away when he spotted Val making her way over to him with Shadow trailing behind her. Though she did not show it, Brynden knew that she mourned the loss of her sister's husband and the father of her nephew. "You should not be wandering about by yourself." Though he did not show it, Brynden was worried for her. He knew what it was like to lose a loved one, and though he was not on the best of terms with Mance, he respected him, for he knew it was not easy to unite the Free Folk. Val responded with that damn smile of hers that could turn the heads of any man in the Seven Kingdoms. "I can take care of myself. Besides, I wasn't alone. Your wolf stayed by my side the entire time. You still should have had some guards with you. You are my wife and queen. Your safety is of paramount importance to me." He leaned forward and pressed his lips against hers, taking her scent in that smelled like honey, before pulling away. "You should get some rest. We leave for Winterfell in the morning." She placed her hand on his arm and slowly ran her fingers up and down his muscle. "We both should. Though I have no intention of going to bed just yet." Knowing what she was implying, Brynden grinned before looking down at Shadow. "Go to Jon, boy. I'm certain that he could use your company more than me." Heeding his command, Shadow took off, letting Brynden lose himself to the lust that was building up inside of him. Crashing his lips against Val's, Brynden wrapped his tongue around hers while leading her back into his quarters, kicking the door behind him shut before pawing at Val's clothes, stripping her down while she did the same to him. Now naked as the day they were born, Brynden lifted Val off the ground, with her wrapping her legs around his waist as he carried her over to the bed. He then gently set her on the bed before thrusting himself inside of her, causing Val to cry out his name, digging her nails into his skin. Grunting in pain and pleasure, Brynden continued to ravage her, losing himself to the pleasure, and forgetting all about his duties as a king and the threat beyond the wall. It didn't take long for him to finally spill his seed inside of her, with the both of them falling to sleep shortly after the deed was done. The next morning, Brynden made his over to where Jon was standing while his men mounted their horses, getting ready for the journey back to Winterfell. The banners of the northern houses flapped proudly against the wind. Val was already at the front of the column, with Shadow prowling about, scaring some of the horses. Jon turned to face him, smiling as he approached. "I'm sorry to see you go, Your Grace." Leave it to Jon to act all formal while they were in the presence of others. Well, two could play that game. "As am I, Lord Commander, but my place is at Winterfell, and it is time that I went home. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell." The words were left unspoken, but Jon understood what he meant. "Tell the others that I miss them and that I hope to see them all again soon." Brynden smirked. "No doubt in my mind that Arya misses you more." Jon chuckled. I don't doubt that." A slight snow had begun to fall, but it was nothing they weren't already used to. Not for the first time, Brynden wished that Jon could come with him to help prepare their people for the coming storm, but he was the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch now. His place was here at the wall, just as Brynden's was at Winterfell as the king in the north. "I swear to you that I will return with more men. Until then, don't knock the wall down while I am away." Jon grinned. "The wall will still be standing when you return." Brynden then pulled Jon in for a hug, surprising Jon before he returned it and patted him on the back. "Stay safe, brother." "You too," Jon muttered. They then pulled away from each other and Brynden nodded his head before making his way down to the head of the column. He spotted several of the brothers of the Night's Watch looking at his men in awe. There was no doubt in his mind that they were not used to seeing this many men at Eastwatch, especially a king's army. The members of his new guard bowed their heads to Brynden in respect as he made his way past them. To show a sign of unity between the North and the Free Folk, Brynden had named several new warriors from the Free Folk to his battle guard. Torek, The eldest son of Tormund was an obvious choice, along with Sigorn, the new head of House Thorn. Brynden planned to name Sigorn the new lord of the Dread Fort when they returned to Winterfell. One of his squires came over to him with the reins of his horse and Brynden took them before mounting up. Though he was leaving Jon behind, Brynden was looking forward to see his family again after what he had seen beyond the wall. It had been too long since he had seen all of his family together. Though they were missing Robb and father, Brynden was grateful that they still had each other after everything they had been through. Urging his horse forward, Brynden led the column of horse, knights, lancers, freeriders, and mounted bowmen, down the path to Winterfell. Shadow ran ahead of him, eager to see the rest of his littermates at Winterfell. "How do you plan on dealing with them?" Val asked, as they made some distance from Eastwatch. "I don't know yet." Brynden sighed in frustration, running his hand through his hair. "One thing I know for certain is that the wall is our first line of defense against the others. Even with the Knights of the Vale and Stannis, our numbers will not be enough to stop them." Though Brynden hated to admit it, Jon was right. They couldn't possibly hope to stop the others by themselves. Even with the combined might of the North, Free Folk, and the Vale, Brynden doubted their odds of success against the others. They needed all of Westeros behind them if they hoped to stand a chance of beating them. It would be a difficult task to rally the South against their common foe, and even then Brynden loathed the thought of fighting alongside the Lannisters, but he would do whatever it took to protect the North against the coming storm. Whatever it took, Brynden vowed. Chapter 25, Wildlings, Northmen, Knights of the Vale. We're nearing the end of the Dance with Dragons and heading into the Winds of Winter, only 2 chapters left. There will also be an appendix coming soon, probably after the end of this book or somewhere in between the Winds of Winter segment, as there will be too many characters for me to keep up with as new factions begin to enter the war. The Arryn fleet stole into White Harbor on the evening tide, their sails rippling with every gust of wind. 20,000 men sailed with Catelyn, all sworn to the 6 lords who had helped her achieve the alliance between the Eyrie and Winterfell. The rest of the Knights of the Vale had been left behind to defend their lands should the Iron Throne retaliate. If only they had sailed with her the first time, things would be different and Robb might still be alive, but they were not to blame. It was Lysa's fault, hers and Petta's. She should never have trusted them, but there was nothing she could do about it now. The past was in the past. All that mattered to her now was seeing all of her children again, together at Winterfell where they belonged. Glancing over at Sansa, who stood with her new husband, Catelyn remembered the conversation she had with her after the wedding, with Sansa confessing to going to the Queen after Ned had told her that she was going back to Winterfell with Arya. She couldn't believe it, but then she remembered that it was Petta who had told her, and she knew that she would be playing right into his hands if she let her anger get the better of her. For now Catelyn tried not to think about it, as she knew that soon Petta's head would be on a spike when Brynden learned that they had the man who had betrayed Ned in their custody. Sansa need not suffer any more than she had, and Catelyn knew that Brynden would forgive her just as she had. The past was in the past, Catelyn repeated to herself. All that mattered now was the future. As they sailed into the harbor, the walls of whitewashed stone rose before them, on the eastern shore where the White Knife plunged into the Firth. The direwolf of House Stark and the merman of House Marndale was everywhere in evidence, flying from the towers of the new castle, above the Seal Gate, and along the city walls. Lord Marndale had indeed been busy since she had last seen him, Catelyn noted, as she spotted the jetty walls concealing the inner harbor. The outer harbor was larger, but the inner harbor offered better anchorage, sheltered by the city wall on one side and the looming mass of the Wolf's Den on another, and now by the jetty wall as well. A score of ships could be concealed behind those walls, waiting only a command to put to sea. The harbor was indeed well defended should the South ever decide to invade the North. Lord Marndale and a retinue of guards awaited them as they docked at the port. Lord Harold was the first to disembark, along with Sansa, with Catelyn and the other lords trailing behind her. "Welcome, my lords, my ladies. We have been expecting you," Lord Marndale greeted, bowing his head. "Where is the king? I thought he would be the one to greet us, seeing as he did summon us for our men," Harold asked, causing Lord Marndale to frown. "The king is currently riding for Winterfell from Eastwatch after rescuing the wildlings at Hardham." "Wilderling scum," Catelyn heard Lord Royce mutter behind her. Catelyn knew their new allies would disagree with her son's alliance with the wildlings, just as she knew that many northern lords still disagreed with his decision. Her son was walking on thin ice with this new alliance, and she blamed Stannis Baratheon and Jon Snow for putting her son in this situation. It was moments like these that Catelyn wished her son had never married the Wilderling girl. It would at least leave him in a far better position than dealing with a potential rebellion from his bannermen. All it would take was a single spark to destroy the alliance, and her son's marriage to the Wilderling girl would be all for nothing. "So we are to ride for Winterfell then, I take it?" Harold asked. "Aye, though you are not the only ones. The king is summoning all of his bannermen to Winterfell, which means that I will also be accompanying you." "All of them?" Catelyn was just as surprised as the other lords when she heard the words come out of Lord Marndaelis' mouth. Her son couldn't possibly preparing for another war, could he, or was it something else? "He doesn't mean to march south, does he?" Lord Royce asked, voicing all of their thoughts. Lord Marndaelis shook his head. "Not south, north." "North?" Lord Royce scoffed. "What other enemy is out there for him to deal with now that he is fraternizing with wildlings? You wouldn't believe me even if I told you. Even I'm still having a hard time believing it, even with the men and lords who had accompanied the king swearing to have seen them at Hardham." "Them?" Lord Harold parried. "What do you mean?" "The others." The lords and Harold immediately guffawed at Lord Marndaelis' reply. Even Catelyn found it hard to believe, though she knew that her son was no liar and wouldn't make something up like the others' existence. "You can't be serious. The others are only a story, a tale to make children shiver. Your king must be mad if he would have us believe that the others are real." Lord Royce said. "Believe me, I wish he was, but the other lords that were with him also saw them with their own eyes. I know these men and they would never lie about something like this." Lord Marndaelis defended. "That must be the reason why Brynden made the alliance with the wildlings," Catelyn realized. Brynden trusted Jon Snow, just as much as Lord Marndaelis trusted the men who supported his claim, and that would be more than enough of a reason for her son to believe their existence. She shuddered at the thought of the others being real though, remembering the tales old Nan used to tell her children at night. If they were real, what chance did they have at beating them? She prayed that her son had a plan to defeat them. The other lords however were still skeptical of the others' existence. "I'll believe it when I see it," Lord Harold declared. "Come my lords, my ladies. We've lingered here for far too long for my liking. You and your men should rest for a bit before we ride for Winterfell. Then we can hear from the king himself of what he saw at Hardham." Lord Marndaelis turned around and led their group to Newcastle. Marble mermaids lit the way as they climbed the castle stair to Newcastle. Catelyn could hear Lord Royce scoffing and muttering about northern fools, knowing that he found the existence of the others ludicrous. Even Catelyn still had a hard time believing it, but she knew her son would never call all the northern lords to Winterfell unless the threat to the north was serious. Sir Kevan Lannister had arrived to the capital within a fortnight after receiving a raven from Pycelle, accepting the position of Lord Regent and Protector of the realm when he had learned of his niece's imprisonment by the High Sparrow. Now he found himself sitting on the small council, listening to the dire news of the north. "Lady Sansa Stark has wed Lord Harold Arryn, my lord. They now sail for White Harbor with an army, according to my spies," Qyburn informed them. "Winterfell and the Eyrie, bound together by marriage." Should the demon of the north turn his attention south, Kevan feared that another devastating war like the War of the Five Kings would erupt across Westeros. Cersei was right, they should never have sent the Stark girl back to her family, but all Tywin wanted was his son back and he could not blame him for that. Along with the wildlings, the Black Wolf could muster a force even greater than the one Robb Stark had during the war. Yet the king in the north had not made a move since securing an alliance with the wildlings and the Eyrie, which caused Kevan to worry. He hated the waiting and not knowing what his enemy was planning. And what of Stannis? Lord Tyrell, the Hand of the King, asked. Still on Dragonstone along with the Marndaelis fleet. Several ships though have been reported sailing north for reasons unknown. They have the numbers to launch an attack or to resume the war, yet they do nothing. Lord Randall Tarly voiced his thoughts. What are Baratheon and Stark up to? I wish I had the answer, my lord. Qyburn bowed his head. Kevan still found it hard to believe that a man like Stannis Baratheon would form an alliance with Brynden Stark whilst he still called himself king in the north. Something must have happened at the wall to cause those two men to form an alliance together. When will these battles end? Kevan was growing too old for this, but he would do his duty for the realm and his house, to ensure that Tywin's legacy would not be brought down by the follies of his children. What of the Blackfish? Kevan asked. The last he had heard of that man before he had left King's Landing was that the Blackfish was still raiding and plundering in the Westerlands, unleashing the fury of the North on their lands. He knew their attacks were nothing more than a distraction, but was still grateful that Cersei at least had the sense to send an army to the Westerlands to deal with them before her imprisonment. The Blackfish has pulled back his men to the Winter Fleet. Qyburn replied. Mace snorted. No doubt he decided to fall back when he learned of my men's arrival. Kevan highly doubted that, knowing that the Blackfish would be more than capable of defeating the Tyrell army with the men he had. It only proved his point that the Blackfish's raids in the Westerlands was nothing more than a feint to draw their forces away from the south, but for what purpose he could still not figure out. Have our men fall back to Riverrun, he ordered. They will find no battle in the west. Lord Tyrell and Tarly looked at him as if he had lost his wits. The Blackfish raids in your lands and you would have me pull my men back. You would let these barbarians loose in your lands unopposed for what? Lord Tyrell asked. Their attacks are nothing more than a distraction, to draw our forces away from the south. You may underestimate the Black Wolf, my lord, but I will not. Kevan still remembered the massacre on the Green Fork and the Whispering Wood. How the Stark boys had managed to fool Tywin and capture Jaime along with lifting the siege of Riverrun. He would not make the same mistake and fall for the Black Wolf's tricks. They had just managed to take control of the south, with only Storm's End and Dragonstone left to take, and Kevan would see to it that it would remain that way. Lord Tarly then nodded in agreement when he realized what Kevan meant. A boy he may be, the Black Wolf has more cunning than the young wolf. Lord Tyrell frowned. You believe Brynden Stark means to invade the south? He has no more allies after he abandoned the River Lords to secure the north. He has the Wildlings and the Knights of the Vale at his side. Their numbers are more than enough to overwhelm our forces if we spread ourselves thin. Kevan pointed out. Even a small force with a skilled commander would be able to achieve several victories before they would be able to consolidate their forces. It would also take time to march their armies to wherever the enemy struck, with the Tyrell and Tarly armies in the capital to secure Queen Margaery's release from the Faith. I doubt Stark has any interest in the Iron Throne unless he means to sit Stannis Baratheon on it. Lord Tyrell grumbled. No, but he may exact his revenge on the Freys for their part in the Red Wedding. Kevan had no doubt that the twins would be the first place Brynden Stark would attack should he decide to turn his attention south. For now we should keep our attention focused on the north. Lord Redwyne will keep Stannis occupied with the ships he has left, but that does not mean that we should let our guards down. Kevan said. Until this farce of a trial with my daughter is dealt with, the others can deal with them. Let these two kings sit and do nothing while we focus on dealing with the High Sparrow. Very well, my lord. This meeting is adjourned for today. Lord Tyrell grunted and stood up, leaving the chambers with Lord Tarly trailing behind him. Qyburn bowed before taking his leave, leaving Kevan alone to his thoughts. The riders poured through the castle gates, both new and old faces Bran recognized from his brother's last stay at Winterfell. They were 5,000 strong, and over their heads a dozen icy banners whipped back and forth in the northern wind, emblazoned with the grey direwolf of Stark. His brother's sworn swords and companions had a few new additions, Bran noticed, spotting a few wildlings amongst the group. Yet his brother at the head of the column caught Bran's attention, as he stared in awe at his brother's Valyrian steel armor. Even after already seeing it once before, it was still a sight to behold. Beside his brother was his queen and wife, Val, of the Free Folk. The two of them together looked like a true king and queen compared to when King Robert Baratheon had come to Winterfell. Brynden dismounted from his horse and approached Bran while the others continued to pour through the gates. He smiled when he stopped in front of him, with Shadow prowling the area, searching for his littermates. You've grown a few inches since I last saw you. Bran wanted to hug his brother, but Brynden was his king now, and not just a brother, so he said only, Your Grace. Winterfell is yours. By then the others were dismounting as well, and grooms were coming forward for their mounts. Anything of importance happen while I was away? Brynden asked. Bran smiled. You'll never guess who Sir Helman's scouts picked up on the causeway to Moat Cailin. Brynden raised an eyebrow. Who? Bran looked over his shoulder and nodded his head. A stocky man with a clean-shaven appearance approached, now clad in the silvery mail and long grey cloak of the Stark Guards. Your Grace, he bowed. Brynden studied the man for a moment before his eyes widened in recognition. Harwin. I thought you were dead along with the rest of Father's guards. Not yet. Harwin grinned. Are there others with you? Harwin shook his head. I'm the only one left from your father's guards. Bran then chose to interrupt the conversation. His companions said they were here to help you fight in the coming war. Companions? Brynden frowned. A scarecrow of a man, wearing a ragged black cloak speckled with stars and an iron breastplate dinted by 100 battles, stepped forward. A thicket of red gold hair hid most of his face, save for a bald spot above his left ear where his head had been smashed in. Dondarrion. You're still alive. The raspy voice belonging to the Hound spoke up from behind Brynden. Clegane. Never thought I would find you here up so far north. The scarecrow that was Beric Dondarrion replied. You're the ones Arya spoke of, Brynden realized. The Brotherhood without banners. We are, Your Grace. As your brother already mentioned, we've come to help in the wars to come. Our swords are yours if you will have us. We could use all the men we can get. Brynden smiled. Is Mother with you? Bran asked, hoping to see her again. Brynden shook his head. She should be arriving soon at White Harbor with Sansa. Lord Marndael will be waiting for their arrival. What about Jon? He is the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch now. His place is at the wall, fortifying our defenses against our true enemy. Brynden replied. Let's just hope they don't decide to assault the wall while we are here. Small Janumba muttered. The wall has held them back for centuries. So long as it is still standing, we have nothing to fear. Brynden tried to sound sure of it, though Bran noticed that his brother did not at all seem to believe the words he spoke. Let's hope you're right. Once the conversation ended, Brynden said to Bran, walk with me. We have much to discuss. Brynden led Bran away from the group as the others began to make their way into the castle. It was still a strange sight for Bran to see wildlings walking beside northerners, but times were changing and Bran knew that Brynden would do anything to protect the north. You saw something at the wall, didn't you? Bran asked, hoping to find out what was going on. Something must have happened to have caused Brynden to call his bannermen to Winterfell. Brynden sighed, shutting his eyes for a moment before opening them again. The others are real. I saw them with my own eyes and even killed one of them. I know I must sound like a madman to you right now. That's why you let the wildlings through the wall. Bran pointed out. Brynden nodded. But we lost Mance and 30,000 wildlings to the others. We don't have the numbers to deal with an army like that. How do you plan to deal with them? Bran hoped that his brother at least had a plan to defend the north against the others instead of relying on the wall. My first priority is protecting my people, which is why I will be having the Winter Fleet ferry those who cannot fight to the Iron Islands. It will take some time, but at least we will be able to have less areas to worry about should the wall fall. An evacuation. Bran's eyes widened. It's not perfect, but it will mean fewer enemies to swell the ranks of the dead. For now that's the only thing I'm focused on until the Lords of the Vale arrive. I can already foresee how they will look at me when I tell them what I saw at Hardham. Brynden chuckled. But you'll still tell them anyways, Bran muttered. Brynden smiled. Because at the end of the day, the only enemy that matters is the one beyond the wall. If I can convince the Lords of the Vale of the true threat, then there is a chance I will be able to convince the other 7 kingdoms to band together against the White Walkers. You will, Bran assured him, for both their sakes. He didn't want to know what would happen if his brother failed. The war council Brynden had summoned consisted of his bannermen, the free folk, the Lords of the Vale, and the few river lords who had returned with the Blackfish. Brynden and his northern lords sat at the head of the high table, with his siblings seated below the raised platform. The Great Jon sat at his left hand, along with Galbart Glover, Lady Mormont, Lord Harry on Karstark, with Val seated to his right, and then his mother, Lord Marndael, Lord Hornwood, and the Northern Mountain clans. Opposite of them were the Vale Lords, the so-called Lords Declarant. Lord Harold Arryn sat at the head of the table, with Lord Royce by his side, and the other 5 lords arrayed beside them. To the right were the Free Folk, with Tormund as their leader, along with the chieftains who followed him. Then to the left was Brynden Blackfish with Lord Mallister, and Lord Blackwood, the only river lords to have accompanied them north. Tensions were running high in the great hall of Winterfell as Brynden listened to the arguing going back and forth between the lords of the Vale, the Wildlings, and lords of the north. He should have foreseen this, but he needed them all present to discuss their plans against the coming storm. Several fights had already broken out in the Winter Town, and luckily no one had been killed yet. It was only a matter of time though unless Brynden did something about it. You can't expect the Knights of the Vale to side with Wildling invaders. Lord Royce exclaimed, with several other Vale lords nodding in agreement. We didn't invade. We were invited. Tormund pointed out. Not by me. Lord Royce declared, sitting down, with the arguing resuming once more, causing Brynden to stand up. The Free Folk are bound by marriage to the north, just as the Eyrie is to Winterfell. Brynden pointed out, causing many to turn their attention to him. They are no longer our enemies, my lords. The true enemy lies beyond the wall, waiting to strike, and if we don't band together we will not survive. And how do we know that you aren't just being used by the Wildlings? Lord Harold, Sansa's husband, asked, standing up. Forgive me, your grace, but I find it hard to believe that this army of the dead and others exist. For all we know you and your lords could be deceived by their sweet words, just like the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Do you take me for a fool, Lord Arryn? Brynden growled, his tone as cold as ice, causing the young lord to flinch. I was fighting the Lannisters, scouring the Iron Islands, and defending the wall while you were still a green boy. I have faced many enemies on the field, but none of them terrified me as much as the others did. I fought one of them and barely survived. The lords that are standing beside me can all vouch for me. He could still remember the screams, the dead blue eyes staring at him, and the way the other moved as if it was the wind. Were it not for his Valyrian steel armor and ice, Brynden was certain that he would be dead right now. The very thought of how close he was to death and what he saw at Hardham caused him to realize just how petty their war in the Seven Kingdoms was. You are a fool if you believe that I would be deceived by Wildlings. The Great Jon added, standing up, glaring at the young lord. My family has been fighting their kind for as long as I could remember. We are closer to the wall than any house here and have clashed against Wildling raiders time and again. I would rather split my own belly than be made a fool of by Wildlings, but what I saw at Hardham is as real as you and me. As much as I hate to admit it, they are our allies now, whether we like it or not. Brynden nodded to the Great Jon in thanks while he sat back down. He then glanced at Lord Arryn who wisely chose to sit back down as well. He was around Brynden's age, but still inexperienced, though Brynden supposed he would also be like him if he had an experienced war and been crowned king. Still, he was grateful at least that Lord Harold had sworn his swords to his cause, which made him 10 times better than his cousin Robert in his eyes. I know this new alliance is a lot to take in, my lords. Even I was skeptical of it at first until I was convinced of the importance from the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Brynden admitted, causing many of the lords to murmur to each other. If the brothers of the Night's Watch could set aside their differences with the Free Folk then so could we. That is why I am pleased to announce that Small Janumber has agreed to take a Wildling woman as his wife. This caused many lords in the room to shout in disapproval, something Brynden had anticipated. The Great Jon slammed his fist onto the table, causing many to shut up in response. Brynden was grateful that he had discussed such an idea to the Great Jon and Small Janumber first when they were riding for Winterfell. Initially they were opposed to such a match, until Brynden had convinced them the importance of the match. Small Jon had reluctantly agreed to it, as his house was indebted to Brynden for gifting them Brightraw. Not to mention that it would also help solidify their alliance in ways that not even Brynden's marriage to Val could. For if the Umbers, sworn enemies to the Free Folk since the wall was built could put aside their differences then so could the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. I don't like the thought of taking a Wildling as my wife either, my lords, but we all must make sacrifices for the greater good. Small Jon added, standing up. And I take it that you would have our sons and daughters also take a Wildling as their spouse. Lady Anya Waynwood scoffed. No, you are free to wed your children to whomever you see fit. Brynden replied. A marriage between an Umber and the Free Folk is important, however, for our alliance. So how do you plan on dealing with these others and their dead? Lord Royce asked, frowning. As part of our alliance, the Free Folk have been helping the Night's Watch man the abandoned castles along the wall. As you all know, the wall hasn't been properly manned for years and the Night's Watch numbers have been dwindling. The wall is our first line of defense, but should it fall, the last hearth will be one of the first to be hit. Brynden replied. Luckily we have giants and mammoths to help out with our defenses. Small Jon Umber grinned, causing the Vale Lords to murmur to each other in disbelief. Then what is our purpose if you have giants and mammoths? Lord Harold asked. We can't throw all our strength at our first lines of defense. Brynden replied. Winterfell is the heart of the north and should be heavily defended. Half of your forces will help augment my own army. The other half will head to Moat Cailin, which will be our last line of defense. Hopefully it will not come to that. Half of the giants and mammoths will come to Winterfell, Tormund added. If these others and their whites are as grave of a threat as you say they are, should we at least seek out the aid of the other 7 kingdoms? Lady Anya asked. Stannis Baratheon is on Dragonstone mining the dragon glass and sending them north with the Mandaeally fleet. He has also gained the gold of the Iron Bank and is using them to hire sellswords across the narrow sea. As for the Lannisters, you all know how I feel about them, but we need them and their allies the Tyrells and Martells if we hope to survive this war, which is why I plan on using the Kingslayer to negotiate with them. His response was immediately met with disapproval as the Southron lords roared in disagreement. The Kingslayer should be executed for his crimes, not pardoned and released. Lord Blackwood cried out. The Lannisters cannot be trusted. Lord Royce added. You may as well bend the knee and swear fealty to the Iron Throne, Lord Harold scoffed. Brynden knew exactly how they felt as they continued to voice their disapproval. Hell, he even hated himself for suggesting they ally with the Lannisters, as he would sooner trust a White to fight alongside him than a Lannister. Jon was right though. They would need all of Westeros united under one banner if they hoped to survive. The others were on the move though after centuries of having the rest of the 7 kingdoms believe they were dead, and Brynden feared that meant they had a way to pass through the wall, which had been raised after the long night to prevent such an event from happening. Either way, Brynden was not going to let the North or his people suffer because he underestimated the enemy. Brynden raised his hand, silencing the room. Stark, Lannister, Baratheon, Arryn, Tully, Tyrell, Martell, it doesn't matter which house you come from, the enemy won't care. To them we are nothing more than a sack of meat to slaughter and add to their army. Sacrifices must be made, and if we must lay in bed with our enemies then so be it. We can go back to killing each other once the true enemy is dealt with. My lord father was butchered at the Red Wedding and I will never forget that, but what I saw at Hardham is coming for all of us. Harry on added, balling his hand into a fist. I don't like the Lannisters any less than any of you, as my brothers and father died fighting them, but we need them. We cannot hope to defeat them alone. Yesterday's wars don't matter anymore. The only thing that matters now is the living and the dead. So I ask you, my lords, are you with me or not? Brynden continued. The room was silent for a moment before Lord Royce stood up. We were all frustrated with your lady aunt when she refused to aid your brother during the war. That will not happen again. Our swords are yours, your grace. Lord Harold stood up, grinning. So long as I get to test my steel is fine by me. We are kin now, and that means something in the Vale. The Vale is with you, your grace. There was no words needed for Tormund and the other chieftains as they simply nodded their heads to Brynden in acknowledgement. Brynden looked at his uncle, who stepped forward. You needn't ask where my loyalties lie, your grace. Lord Mandaeally was the last to stand up, representing the lords who did not accompany Brynden to Hardham. The North remembers, your grace. We are with you until the end. Thank you, my lords. Brynden sighed in relief. He had done it. He had united the Free Folk, the North, and the Knights of the Vale against their common foe. Brynden knew the South would be a challenge to convince, and he had an idea to go about doing it. He just hoped that Jon and the Night's Watch were up to the task. 578 Chapter 26, Justice of the North. Jaime couldn't believe his luck. As he sat once more in a cell of Winterfell, waiting for his execution, He was no fool to believe that he was going to be walking out of here alive after the Red Wedding. Stark would want his head for what had happened to his brother, the young wolf, even though he had nothing to do with his death. Shivering in the cold, Jaime listened to the groans of his cellmate, Littlefinger. Clearly the North did not agree with either of them and was letting them suffer for their crimes. When he had arrived and been thrown into his cell, Jaime was surprised to say the least when Littlefinger was also thrown in with him. He had then learned that the young Robert Arryn had passed away, succeeded by Harold Arryn, a distant kin of Jon Arryn, who had then wed Sansa Stark, binding the Eyrie with Winterfell. Cersei would not like that, for Stark now possessed a force that could put an end to Lannister rule should he turn his attention south. And yet he had not retaliated, for Jaime knew when Stark would after he took his head. He then heard the sound of footsteps echoing off the damp walls, and as the torch from his captors lit the dungeon, Jaime found himself staring at Brynden Stark. The boy smirked when Jaime's eyes met his. "Here we are again, Kingslayer." Stark Jaime growled. "Have you come for my head?" Brynden Stark gritted his teeth. "Not today, Kingslayer. As much as I would love to take your head, we need you alive." Jaime thought he was dreaming when he heard that he was going to live. Of all the outcomes he predicted his meeting with Brynden Stark would go, this was not one of them. Why? He couldn't help but ask. There are things out there that will destroy us all if we don't band together. Even if many of my bannermen do not agree with my decision, I have no choice but to keep you alive. What did he mean by that? He was suddenly reminded of his conversation with the Onion Knight before he was shipped off to the north. The wildlings were not the true threat beyond the wall, he recalled the Onion Knight telling him. "What of me, your grace? Surely I could be of some use to you." Littlefinger interrupted, shivering from the cold. "Silence, worm. Your execution will come soon enough." Stark snapped. "Clegane told me of how you betrayed my father when he tried to claim the Iron Throne for Stannis Baratheon. There is no escape from death for you. The North remembers, and soon justice will be served." "Lies. I tried to help him, begged him to serve as protector of the realm, but he refused to listen. Your way with words may have served you in the south, but they will not help you in the north. Enjoy your time in the living while you can." Stark then turned his attention over to the Gauler. "Silence him for me." The Gauler stepped forward, fumbling with his keys before finding the right one and unlocking it. Jaime then heard Littlefinger's cries of resistance before he was knocked out. "And why is it that you need me alive?" Jaime asked, still wary around the man who would gladly take his head without any hesitation. He would not show fear or weakness in front of the boy, but that did not mean that he was not cautious around him. Jaime still remembered the last time they were together in a cell and Stark took his sword hand. He had to give the boy credit though for not taking his head immediately upon seeing him instead of speaking with him. They were enemies still, and nothing was going to change that. "To help me negotiate an alliance with the Lannisters," Stark replied, pulling up a stool and sitting down in front of Jaime's cell. "I know that I have a force that rivals yours now with the Eyrie and the Free Folk, but even then I doubt they will be enough to stop them. Again with this mysterious threat beyond the wall nonsense." Yet what Stark spoke was true to Jaime. After the War of the Five Kings, the Lannisters had lost thousands of soldiers to the Starks and Baratheons, but with the Tyrells, Freys, and Martells as their allies they could still field an army to hold the kingdoms that were still sworn to the Iron Throne. "You know the only way to make peace with us is to either bend the knee or take the black." Jaime grinned, enjoying the fact that Stark needed him alive to negotiate with the Iron Throne. "That will never happen," Stark growled, balling his hands into fists. "The North remembers, and we will never submit to a Southron king ever again." "Then you may as well take my head here and now," Stark Jaime snapped. "My family will never listen to what you have to offer so long as you call yourself king." "That will soon change." Stark frowned. "I know words will not help me in the south, which is why I will be showing them and you of what is truly out there." "And what exactly is out there?" "All of the wildlings are behind the wall now, if I remember correctly." Jaime growled. "There's nothing else out there now unless you would have me believe that Snooks and Grumpkins are real." Stark narrowed his eyes at him. "If you would rather lose your head here and now, tell me, Kingslayer, and I will gladly take it. I don't have to make an alliance with you, as you well know who supports me, but the cold winds are rising beyond the wall and soon the long night will be upon us. Jaime snorted in disbelief, almost unable to believe what he had just heard. The Long Night, that's what this is all about. You are truly mad if you believe that the others are real. Believe me, I wish I was as well, but they are out there and waiting to strike. The longer we all continue to squabble amongst ourselves, the stronger our enemy will continue to grow. Why else do you think I made an alliance with the Free Folk and Stannis Baratheon? Jaime couldn't help but ponder about that, as he knew what kind of a man Stannis Baratheon was and still found it hard to believe at times that he had made an alliance with Brynden Stark, the king in the north. If this enemy you speak of does exist, what will you do afterwards when they are dealt with? Jaime asked, still not believing in all of this nonsense about the others. Yet his head was still not on a spike, so for now he would humor the Stark boy. Stark smirked. I think we both know the answer to that. He then stood up, glancing over at Littlefinger's cell before turning his attention back to Jaime. Think about what I have said, and when the Lord Commander returns from his ranging you will see for yourself what is out there. Until then, enjoy your cell, Kingslayer. Stark then turned and left, leaving Jaime alone once more in the darkness of his cell as the flames from the torch were extinguished. It was moments like these that made Bran realize how much he missed his family being together. As he dined in the great hall with his siblings, Mother, Uncle Brynden, Val, and little Lyanna. Even Rickon was smiling and laughing again while their wolves played with each other and gnawed at their bones. The only one missing was Jon, but he was the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch now and he had his own duties to attend to at the wall. He just hoped that he would be able to come down and visit them like how Uncle Benjen used to. Dragons. Brynden snorted in disbelief while he held little Lyanna in his lap, watching in amusement as she tried to reach over to pet Shadow. An unlikely tale, Uncle. I am only the messenger, nephew. Tales of the Dragon Queen have spread from the east and Lord Marndaly thought you should know about her and her dragons. The mention of dragons piqued Bran's interest, though Brynden didn't seem at all interested with the matter. The only thing his brother seemed to be focused on nowadays was the wall and the others. Everything else was pushed away, which was why it was so rare for Bran to see Brynden dining with the rest of them, as he would usually distance himself from them or spend time holding war councils with his bannermen. Even if the tales are true, she's a continent away from us and under siege. She is nothing more than another doomed pretender like Stannis. Why should I worry about this woman? Because if this enemy you speak of is real, then we will need her dragons in the wars to come, as fire kills their soldiers, as I recall you telling me. She's a Targaryen, the daughter of the Mad King who burned grandfather alive and strangled Uncle Brandon to death. Brynden snapped, gritting his teeth. I am already at my limit with sparing the Kingslayer and forming a truce with the Lannisters, but the Targaryens are an entirely different matter. The North remembers, Uncle, and if you recall, you helped bring down the dynasty that she is trying to restore. Whatever happened to yesterday's war's not mattering anymore. Val interrupted, frowning. It's like you said, the others don't care what house you Neelers come from. How is this any different? Besides, I'm certain that she will be grateful and listen to you if you defeat her enemies and lift the siege. Uncle Brynden added. Bran kept his mouth shut while he listened, but he could tell that his brother was not at all pleased with the idea of forming an alliance with a Targaryen. He understood how he felt though, since their father went to war against her family after her brother, Prince Rhaegar, kidnapped their aunt Lyanna and raped her. There was just too much bad blood between their two houses, but if Brynden could push aside his enmities with House Lannister, then perhaps he could do the same with the Targaryens. Brynden ran his hand through his hair before sighing. Even if I wanted to, she's half a world away, and there's still the matter with moving those who cannot fight to safety. My place is here in the north, not off chasing some fairy tale and praying that I'm not burned alive when I meet her. You place too much burden on yourself, his mother said. You are not the only Stark in Winterfell, and there are others who can help oversee the evacuation. I would have thought you would want me to stay, Brynden said in a surprised tone. I would want nothing more than for you to be safe, ruling Winterfell and raising your children, and for your siblings to grow up and live happily, but I know now that will not come to pass if this enemy you speak of is out there and coming for us all. Only you, the King in the North and Lord of Winterfell, will be able to convince this Dragon Queen to fight alongside the North. Brynden was silent for a moment, and Bran wondered what was going through his brother's mind. He was grateful that he wasn't in his brother's position, as he didn't know how he would be able to bear the kinds of responsibilities that Brynden dealt with. If his brother did decide to leave though, Bran knew he would rule in his place as the Stark in Winterfell until he returned. It will take more than just mere words to sway her, Brynden said at last. If Jon is successful with his ranging, then maybe I will consider going. For now though I must deal with Littlefinger. His time has come. He's the one who betrayed father, isn't he? Arya interrupted. I and Clegane can attest to that. He was there in the throne room that day when Littlefinger betrayed him and drew his dagger on him. You all don't need to come see his execution if you don't want to. We will go, Arya declared. Arya mother scolded while Brynden chuckled. I will as well, Bran added, remembering his father's words the day he saw his father take the head of a deserter of the Night's Watch. The blood of the first men still flows in the veins of the Starks, and we hold to the belief that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. His father's words echoed in his mind. If you would take a man's life, you owe it to him to look into his eyes and hear his final words. And if you cannot bear to do that, then perhaps the man does not deserve to die. Brynden nodded in understanding. So be it. It may be Brynden swinging the sword, but Bran had as much right as he did to witness the man who betrayed their father pay for his crimes. Castle Black had been too quiet for Melisandre's liking ever since King Stannis and the False King had left, taking their armies with them, leaving only a token force behind to protect Queen Sliss and Princess Shireen, and to help man the wall. She knew it was only a matter of time before their true enemy descended on the wall, but for now all she could do was look into her flames and pray that another dawn would come for them. 2 ravens had arrived from Winterfell within a fortnight, and it did not take long for rumors to spread amongst the crows of another ranging beyond the wall. One of the news that had reached the wall she had already foreseen, but the other one had not been shown to her in the flames. It would seem that even the False King could surprise her with his words and actions. To capture even one of these creatures that served the one whose name may not be spoken was unheard of, and thus it was no surprise to Melisandre when Jon Snow had summoned her with Devan Seaworth coming to bear the news to her. The Lord Commander wishes to see you, my lady, the boy said. Then we had best not keep him waiting, Melisandre smiled, causing the boy to blush. The boy was half in love with her, she knew. He fears me, he wants me, and he worships me. All the same, Devan was not pleased to be here. The lad had taken great pride in serving as a king's squire, and it had wounded him when Stannis commanded him to remain at Castle Black. Like any boy his age, his head was full of dreams of glory. No doubt he had been picturing the prowess he would display at Dragonstone. Though he likely believed he was left behind because of some failure on his part, or of his father, in truth, he was here because Melisandre had asked for him. Lord Davos would not thank her for it, no more than the boy himself, but Seaworth had suffered enough grief after the loss of his 4 eldest sons in the battle on the Blackwater. Making her way out of the room, Melisandre made her way to the armory, where Snow chose to dwell. Her guards escorted her there even though there was no need for it. Entering Snow's quarters, Melisandre spotted his huge white direwolf curled up by the brazier. It opened its eyes for a moment when it heard her enter before closing them. Snow sat at his desk with 2 scrolls curled up with the direwolf visible on them. I take it you know why you are here, my lady? He said at last. I do. Your brother wants you to go beyond the wall again. She replied, knowing where this conversation was going. The last place we saw the others and their whites was at Hardham. I was hoping you might be able to see where they are currently at. I do not want to be ambushed by them again. You and your brother may have saved some of the wildlings at Hardham, but it will make no difference in the end if we are not ready for them. She told him. That is why I want you to search for them. My brother is right. The Southron lords will need proof they exist. If only Snow knew how right he was. She had been around the nobles long enough to realize sometimes it took more than just words to convince them of something. Stannis believed the threat beyond the wall existed, for he had seen them in the flames. Just like how he had slowly come to accept her when he had seen her powers for himself. Then I will look for them, but the task ahead of you will be dangerous. For they are not the only ones you should be worrying about. Snow frowned in response. Daggers in the dark, I remember. I am well aware that my brothers are not pleased with our new alliance with the Free Folk. They dare not lift a finger though so long as my brother rules the north. You are a fool to believe that will stop them. All it takes is one false move and they will strike. Thank you for your warning, my lady. If that is all, you are dismissed. Melisandre sighed in disappointment, knowing that it was futile to continue. He was just the same as Stannis Baratheon was, back in the beginning. Not to mention that he was the complete opposite of his brother. She still remembered how the false king had looked at her back then, but he had never paid her a visit while they were together. She then took her leave, heading back to her chambers to begin looking into the flames for the Servants of Darkness. Not for the first time since returning to Winterfell, Catelyn found herself in the crypts, gazing at Ned's statue, wishing that he were still here. On the opposite side was Robb, the first king in the north since Torrhen Stark bent the knee centuries ago to Aegon the Conqueror. It still pained her to know that Robb was gone, her firstborn, but at least she hadn't lost all of her children. She had Brynden to thank for that. Her thoughts and worries then went over to her second son. Her Brynden was in the same position that Ned was, thrust to rule in Robb's place, always feeling like he was living in the shadow of his dead brother. She wanted to comfort him, lessen the burden he carried, but her Brynden had distanced himself from her and the rest of the family as of late, holding war councils or throwing himself into the training yard. Even Uncle Brynden spoke of how rarely her son had slept after returning from Hardham. He rarely sleeps, Cat Uncle Brynden had told her during one of the few moments they were together. The only company he keeps with now are his bannerman or his wolf. Not even his queen graces his presence these days. That had caused Catelyn to seek out Val while wondering how different the wildlings were to the northerners. It was then that she had learned that her good daughter was with child. He does not need any more distractions, Val had told her when she had sought her out. When he needs me he will come and I will be waiting for him. That had caused Catelyn to realize that Val was truly not like the other ladies of Westeros she was used to being around. She remembered Jane, Robb's wife, and how worried she had been for him about the pressure he was under as a king. A woman of the free folk indeed, Catelyn noted. The sound of footsteps echoing off the walls caused her to turn her attention away from Ned's statue, and smiled when she saw that it was Brynden, who was surprised to see her down there. I thought you would come here. I come here sometimes to think or to be alone. I should have known that you would also come down here. Brynden smiled before looking over at Robb's statue, then to Ned's. I miss them, he sighed, closing his eyes. I know. We all do, Catelyn told him. She took that moment to take in her son's appearance. For a moment she thought she was looking at Ned, as he had been when she had come to Winterfell after Robert's rebellion. Of all the sons she had borne, Ned, Brynden was the only one who took after him. It pained her when she realized that she had hoped she was speaking to Ned and not to Brynden in a moment of weakness. Sometimes I wonder if father would be proud of the man that I have become, or ashamed, Brynden muttered, looking up at Ned's statue. He would be proud of you along with everything you and Robb have achieved. Catelyn assured him. Everything I did and will do have always been for the North and our house, Brynden said, and for a moment Catelyn wondered if he was speaking to her or Ned as he gazed at his statue. The look on his face then hardened and he turned his attention to her. I do not want you or the others to be at Winterfell when the fighting begins. Do you truly believe that the wall will fall? The wall had been standing for centuries and had kept the wildlings out until they were let in. Brynden looked over at Robb's statue, frowning. Everything falls eventually. You would have us wait out the war on the Iron Islands. Catelyn could not help but voice her displeasure at having to stay on the lands that once belonged to the Ironborn. You would rather stay here. Believe me, you would not. Brynden shook his head. There is always the Vale, she pointed out. Where you will be put in even more danger should the mountain clans decide to grow bold, Brynden countered. Lord Royce has told me that some of them already have and are even carrying steel. No, the Iron Islands will be the safest place right now. And what if the Lannisters decide to retaliate? We broke their fleet at Dragonstone. The only manpower the Lannisters have now are from Highgarden, and even then I doubt that Lord Tyrell will stir while his daughter awaits her trial. Catelyn sighed, knowing there was no point to argue anymore when she realized her son had made up his mind about where they would be going. I just hope that you know what you are doing. So do I, Brynden muttered, turning around. The worm you once called your brother will be dying today, by the way. I trust that you have said your farewell. I have nothing more to say to him. She would be able to rest easily now, knowing that the man who had betrayed Ned would soon be gone from this world. To think that she had placed Ned's fate in his hands caused her to curse herself for believing that the boy she had grown up would never betray her trust. She could still remember when she had captured Tyrion Lannister, and how he had continued to deny her accusations that he was the one who sent the catspaw after Bran. Mayhaps he was not lying after all, and that she and Ned were truly misled by someone she thought she could count on. What a fool she had been. "Then I will take my leave." Brynden nodded before starting to walk away, but stopped when she called out to him. "I know it is not my place, but I thought that you should know that your wife is with child," Catelyn told him. She knew that Val would never seek him out, but hopefully at least he would come to her and she would be able to do what she could not for her son. "I know," Brynden chuckled. "Maester Tybalt informed me of the news. Sometimes I forget that she is a woman of the free folk and that she is not at all like you or Sansa." Catelyn smiled. "You should go to her." "I will," he promised before taking his leave, leaving Catelyn alone once more with Ned and Robb. If only they could see now how much Brynden had grown. Looking once more at their statues, she said her farewell to her love and son before making her way out of the crypt. Once outside, she noticed that the courtyard had been cleared away for the execution. There would be no hanging or headsman. Brynden would be the one to swing the sword, just like his father and Robb before him. Many lords and knights had already begun to gather and a light snow had begun to fall over Winterfell. She was used to this kind of snow by now, but soon the weather would be harsher once winter came. She spotted the rest of her family and made her way over to them. Their wolves could be seen prowling about, stalking the yard while causing some of the men to grow nervous around them. Brynden soon arrived, dressed for battle, clad in his Valyrian steel armor, with his surcoat attached to it. Snow continued to fall around them as Horlis Mollin and his guards led Petter through the press, hands still bound. She noted that several of the men from the Vale sneered and spat at the ground when Petter passed by them. The Northerners merely glared at him as he passed by them. "You are making a mistake," Petter cried out, struggling against his captors. "I did not betray your father," the Hound lies. "I told you before, your words will not work on me. Now kneel, worm. Or must I have them force your head onto the block? Then I demand a trial by combat. I deserve that much at least." "No," Brynden scowled, motioning to the guards, and they forced Petter to kneel, holding him down. "My father was never given the right when he was executed, so neither should you." His page, a young wilderling, brought forth the sword, and Brynden unsheathed ice. "Petter Baelish, Lord of Harrenhal." Brynden raised ice into the air. "Here in sight of gods and men, I judge you guilty of treason. In my own name I condemn you. With my own hand I take your life. Would you speak a final word?" Before Petter could reply, ice crashed down, taking off his head with a single sure stroke. Blood sprayed out across the snow, as the head bounced and rolled across the yard. The guards threw the headless body to the side as Brynden sheathed ice before making his way over to Val. No words were spoken when Brynden stopped in front of his queen and they made their way back inside. "It's done," Catelyn thought, glancing one more time at Petter's corpse before following the others back inside. The end.